My son thought leaving me on a desolate Hawaiian beach without water or my heart medication would be the perfect crime. He drove away, watching me in the rearview mirror, convinced I was a dead man walking. He did not know that 72 hours later, instead of identifying my body at the morgue, he would see me on the 6 o'clock news wearing a $5,000 suit and signing a deal that would destroy him. My name is Solomon Hayes, and this is how I turned my own murder into a masterclass in revenge. If you love seeing karma hit hard, like and subscribe right now. You do not want to miss this. The tires of the rented Jeep Wrangler crunched violently over the sharp volcanic gravel, a sound that grated against my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. We had been driving for an hour, heading north towards the Nepali coast, but we had left the paved road miles ago. The air conditioning in the car was broken, or maybe Terrence just refused to turn it on to save gas. The heat was suffocating, a thick, humid blanket that pressed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. But the heat was not the worst part. It was the smell. My daughter-in-law, Courtney, had doused herself in some expensive, cloying floral perfume that filled the small cabin. It smelled like a funeral home trying to mask the scent of decay. Courtney sat in the passenger seat, her manicured feet propped up on the dashboard, scrolling through her phone even though we had lost signal 20 minutes ago. She let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. God, Terrence, are we there yet? It smells like old people and sweat in here. I sat in the back, gripping the safety handle above the door. My knees were aching. At 69 years old, with a history of heart trouble and a lifetime of working logistics at the Port of Baltimore, my joints were not what they used to be. I looked at the back of my son's head. Terrence was gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were a sashy gray. He had not said a word to me since we left the hotel. "We are almost there, babe," Terrence muttered, his voice tight. "Just looking for that spot the concierge told us about. The one with the sunset view?" I frowned. I had been a logistics engineer for 40 years. I knew how to read maps and I knew how to read people. We were driving into a dead zone. The vegetation was getting thicker, the road narrower. This was not a tourist spot. This was where you went if you did not want to be found. "Terrence," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "My leg is cramping up. Maybe we should turn back. It is getting late and I need to take my evening pill soon." Courtney whipped her head around her blue eyes, cold and flat. "Oh, stop complaining, Solomon. We brought you to Hawaii for your birthday. The least you can do is not ruin the vibe. We just want one nice photo for Instagram. Is that too much to ask?" I stayed silent. I had learned over the last 3 years that arguing with Courtney was like wrestling a pig in mud. You both get dirty, but the pig likes it. I looked at Terrence, hoping for some defense, some sign of the boy I had raised alone after his mother passed, but he just kept his eyes on the dirt road, refusing to meet my gaze in the rearview mirror. Suddenly, Terrence slammed on the brakes. The Jeep skidded to a halt in a cloud of red dust. We were at the edge of a cliff overlooking a small rocky cove. The ocean crashed against the black rocks below with a violence that shook the ground. It was beautiful, yes, but it was a violent, lonely kind of beauty. There were no other cars, no footprints, no signs of life. "All right, everybody out," Terrence announced, his voice cracking slightly. "Picture time." I hesitated. My instinct, that old alarm bell that had saved me from falling shipping containers and crane accidents in the past, was ringing loud and clear. "Do not get out of the car, Solomon. Stay in the seat. Dad, come on." Terrence snapped, opening my door. The humidity hit me instantly. I climbed out slowly, wincing as my bad knee took my weight. I reached back in to grab my leather crossbody bag. It contained everything I needed to survive. My wallet, my passport, my phone, a bottle of water, and most importantly, my nitroglycerin pills. My heart condition was stable but fragile. Without those pills, a stress-induced attack could kill me in minutes. As I pulled the strap, Courtney's hand shot out and grabbed the bag. "Here, let me hold," that she said, flashing a smile that did not reach her eyes. "It ruins the silhouette of your shirt for the photo. You want to look nice, don't you?" I held onto the strap. "I prefer to keep it on me, Courtney. My meds are in there." She pulled harder, her nails digging into the leather. "Oh my God, Solomon, do not be so dramatic. We are just walking 10 feet to the edge. I will put it right here in the front seat. It is safe. Go stand over there with Terrence." She yanked the bag from my grip before I could protest further and tossed it onto the driver's seat. She slammed the door shut. I looked at Terrence. He was standing near the edge of the trail, looking down at the jagged rocks below. He was sweating profusely, and it wasn't just the heat. He looked like a man about to throw up. "Terrence," I said, walking toward him, "what is going on? You have been acting strange all week. Is this about the money again?" Last week before the trip, Terrence had come to my house begging for $50,000. He said it was for a business investment, a crypto startup. I knew better. I knew about the gambling debts. I knew about the late-night phone calls from blocked numbers. I had said no. I told him I would not fund his addiction anymore. I told him he needed to get a job. He had cried. Then he had gotten angry. Then suddenly he had apologized and invited me on this trip. Terrence turned to me. His eyes were red. I am sorry, Dad. I really am. But I do not have a choice. What choice? Terrence talked to me. Courtney walked up behind me. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the humid air. He means we are done waiting, Solomon. We are done waiting for you to die of natural causes while we drown in bills. We tried to do this the nice way. We asked for the power of attorney. You said no. So now we are doing it the hard way. I spun around to face her. She was holding the car keys, twirling them around her finger. You are going to leave me here. I asked, the realization hitting me colder than the ocean spray. Not just leave you, she corrected. We are going to let nature take its course. It is a long walk back to civilization, Solomon, especially for an old man with a bad heart and no water. By the time anyone finds you, if they ever find you, nature will have done the job. Terrence, I shouted, turning back to my son. Are you going to let her do this? I am your father. I changed your diapers. I paid for your college. I bailed you out of jail when you were 22. Terrence looked at the ground. You should have just signed the papers, Dad. You have almost $500,000 sitting in that retirement account. You do not even spend it. You just sit on it. It is selfish. We need it. Selfish. The word hung in the air. I had worked double shifts for 30 years to build that nest egg. I had saved it to ensure he would have an inheritance, to ensure my future grandchildren would have college funds. And he called me selfish because I would not let him gamble it away on sports bets. Courtney laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Let's go, Terrence. We have a dinner reservation in Honolulu in an hour, and I want to buy that purse we saw at the resort. She walked back to the Jeep. Terrence hesitated for 1 second. Just 1 second. He looked at me and I saw a flicker of shame, but it was quickly swallowed by his fear of her and his fear of his debts. He turned his back on me. Terrence, give me my bag. At least give me my pills. He did not answer. He got into the driver's seat. Courtney was already inside. I heard the electric click of the doors locking. No, wait. I lunged toward the car. I grabbed the door handle, pulling frantically. It was locked. I pounded on the glass. Terrence, look at me. Do not do this. Inside the car, Courtney did not even look at me. She was checking her makeup in the visor mirror. Terrence put the car in gear. He revved the engine, the sound roaring over the crashing waves. The Jeep lurched forward. I tried to run alongside it, my hand still slapping the metal door. My pills. Just give me my pills. The car accelerated, tires spinning, kicking up a cloud of sharp stones and red dust. One of the rocks struck my shin, a sharp burst of pain that made me stumble. I fell hard onto the abrasive ground, the gravel tearing through my linen trousers and slicing into my palms. I lay there in the dust, coughing, watching the red taillights of the Jeep bounce away down the trail. They did not slow down. They did not tap the brakes. They turned a corner and vanished behind the dense wall of tropical foliage. Silence rushed back in, heavy and terrifying. The only sound was the ocean and the frantic, irregular thumping of my own heart. I pushed myself up to a sitting position, my hands stinging my knees, throbbing. I checked my pockets, a habit from a lifetime of double-checking inventory lists. Left pocket empty, right pocket empty, back pockets empty. They had taken everything. My wallet with my ID and credit cards, my cell phone, my water bottle, and the nitroglycerin. I looked around. To my left, a sheer rock face rising 200 feet. To my right, a drop into the churning ocean. Ahead, a winding dirt road that led 10 miles back to the main highway, a distance I could not walk in my condition. Behind me, nothing but jungle. The sun was beginning to dip lower, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange. It was beautiful, and it was deadly. In Hawaii, once the sun goes down, it gets dark fast and the temperature drops. I tried to stand up, but a wave of dizziness hit me. My chest tightened. It was the familiar squeeze the angina triggered by the stress and the physical exertion of the fall. I instinctively reached for my chest, gasping for air. I needed to calm down. Panic would kill me faster than dehydration. I closed my eyes and visualized the shipping yard. Container A goes to Block B. Crane 4 moves to Dock 7. Order, structure, logic. Breathe, Solomon, breathe. I forced my lungs to expand slowly. In for 4 seconds, hold for 4, out for 4. I assessed my situation like an engineer. Resource audit. The clothes on my back, a light linen shirt, trousers, loafers, suitable for a hotel lobby, not a hike. No water, no food, no communication. Asset audit. My brain, my anger. Yes, anger. I felt it rising hotter than the tropical sun. It wasn't the hot, explosive rage of a young man. It was the cold, hard fury of an old man who realizes his entire life's work has been betrayed. Terrence had not just abandoned me, he had erased me. He had decided I was no longer a person, just an obstacle between him and a bank balance. I looked at the dust where the car had been. "You made a mistake, son," I whispered to the empty air. "You didn't finish the job." I managed to stand up, swaying slightly. I couldn't walk 10 miles, not tonight. I needed shelter. I needed water. I limped toward the edge of the trail where the vegetation met the rocks. I needed to find a spot protected from the wind. As I moved, something white caught my eye in the dirt. It was a crumpled piece of paper half buried in a tire track. I bent down, groaning as my ribs protested, and picked it up. It was a lottery ticket. Terrence must have shoved it in his pocket at the gas station earlier, and it fell out when he got into the car. I turned it over. On the back, in Courtney's distinct, looping handwriting, was a note. "High tide is at 10 p.m. If he stays on the beach, the water covers the rocks. 48 hours before anyone files a report. Transfer clears Tuesday." I stared at the note, my hands trembling. This wasn't just abandonment. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision born of desperation. This was a calculated execution. They knew the tide schedule. They knew the banking protocols. They had brought me to this specific spot because they knew the ocean would wash away the evidence. I looked down at the cove below. The water was indeed rising, the white foam creeping higher up the black rocks with every surge. If I had gone down to the water's edge like they suggested, I would be trapped right now. I crumpled the paper in my fist. I was not going to die here. I was not going to let them win. I was going to survive, and then I was going to take back everything they thought they had stolen. But first, I had to survive the night. The sun vanished below the horizon, and the darkness was absolute. My chest tightened again, a warning shot for my failing heart. I lay down under a low-hanging tree, curling into a ball to preserve heat, and waited for the longest night of my life to begin. The darkness that settled over the Kauai coast was not the peaceful starry blanket you see in travel brochures. It was a heavy, suffocating shroud. The temperature plummeted with a speed that felt personal. The tropical heat replaced by a bone-chilling dampness that seeped into the marrow of my aching joints. I sat huddled against the base of the cliff, the crumpled lottery ticket still clenched in my fist. That piece of paper was no longer just trash, it was a signed confession. High tide at 10 p.m. Courtney's handwriting was neat, precise, the penmanship of a woman who wrote thank-you notes for bridal showers while plotting a murder. I checked my watch, a simple analog piece they had not bothered to steal because it wasn't a Rolex. It was 9:15 p.m. The roar of the ocean was getting louder, closer. I could feel the spray hitting my face, tasting of salt and betrayal. They had done their homework. They knew exactly how the ocean worked here. If I stayed where I was tucked into this small alcove near the trail, the water would not just wet my feet. It would smash me against the jagged lava rocks until there was nothing left to identify. I had to move. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. My legs were trembling, my knees swollen from the earlier fall, but staying put was a death sentence. I looked up the trail. It was pitch black, a tunnel of shadows. I needed high ground. I grabbed a piece of driftwood to use as a cane and forced myself to stand. A sharp pain shot up my shin, but I gritted my teeth. Pain is just information, I told myself. A warning light on the dashboard. Ignore it. Keep the engine running. I began to climb away from the water, scrambling over sharp volcanic rocks that sliced into my palms. Every step was a battle. I was a logistics engineer. I spent my life calculating risks and efficiencies. The efficiency of my current movement was zero. I was burning energy I did not have. Suddenly it happened. The angina. It started as a dull pressure in the center of my chest, like a heavy shipping container being lowered slowly onto my ribs. Then the cable snapped. The pressure turned into a crushing, radiating agony that spread down my left arm and up into my jaw. I gasped, dropping the driftwood, clutching my chest. My heart was fluttering like a bird trapped in a cage, beating with a frantic, irregular rhythm that terrified me. I collapsed onto a flat rock about 20 feet above the trail. The world spun. Black spots danced in my vision, obscuring the faint moonlight. Nitroglycerin. I needed the nitro. It was in the bag. The bag Courtney had thrown into the front seat. the bag that was currently driving away to a shrimp dinner in Honolulu. Panic flared hot and bright. If I panicked, my heart rate would spike and I would die right here on this rock. I would become exactly what they wanted, a tragic natural causes statistic. No, not like this. I forced myself to roll onto my side. I closed my eyes and visualized the control room at the port. When the systems crashed, you did not scream. You rebooted. You went manual. I focused on my breath. In through the nose, deep into the diaphragm. 1, 2, 3, hold. Out through the mouth. 1, 2, 3. I repeated the cycle. The pain was blinding, a hot iron branding my sternum. I thought of Terrence. I thought of the day he was born. I remembered holding him in the hospital, his tiny hand gripping my finger. I had promised his mother on her deathbed that I would take care of him. I had protected him from everything. I had paid off his first gambling debt when he was 22, thinking it was a youthful mistake. I had paid for his rehab when he got hooked on painkillers after a car accident. I had bought him that Jeep he was driving right now. I had loved him so much I had blinded myself to what he had become. A parasite. A weak man who let a greedy woman whisper poison in his ear because he was too cowardly to work for his own living. The anger was better than the panic. The anger was fuel. It warmed the cold blood in my veins. I focused on the image of Courtney's smirk. I focused on the note on the lottery ticket. Transfer clears Tuesday. They were waiting for Tuesday. I just had to live until Tuesday. Slowly, agonizingly, the crushing weight in my chest began to recede. It didn't leave, but it lightened. My heart rate slowed from a frantic gallop to a steady, heavy thud. I was still alive. I lay on the rock, shivering uncontrollably as the adrenaline faded, leaving me freezing. The ocean was raging below me now. I could hear the waves slamming into the spot where I had been sitting 20 minutes ago. If I hadn't moved, I would be gone. Thirst began to set in a dry, scratching claw in my throat. I hadn't had water since lunch. I licked my dry lips, tasting the salt spray. I knew I couldn't drink seawater. That was a rookie mistake that led to madness and kidney failure. I looked around in the darkness. The foliage here was thick. Large, broad leaves of tropical plants surrounded me. It had rained earlier in the day. The humidity was proof of that. I reached out, feeling the surface of a large taro leaf. It was slick wet. I pulled the leaf down carefully, angling it toward my mouth. A trickle of water, maybe a tablespoon, slid down the central vein and onto my tongue. It tasted like dirt and vegetation, but it was fresh water. I did it again with another leaf and another. It wasn't enough to quench the thirst, but it was enough to wet my throat. I curled up on the rock, pulling my knees to my chest to conserve body heat. The night stretched out before me, endless and terrifying. Every rustle in the bushes sounded like a wild boar or a centipede, but the real monsters weren't in the jungle. They were in a hotel room with room service. As I drifted into a fitful, pain-filled doze, my mind drifted back to the conversation that had started all of this. 3 weeks ago. Terrence had come to my house in Baltimore. He wasn't asking for a loan. He was demanding it. "Dad, you don't understand," he had said, pacing my living room, sweating, even though the AC was on. "These guys aren't like the credit card companies. They don't send letters. They send people." How much Terrence I had asked, tired to my bones. $200,000, he whispered. I had stared at him. $200,000. On what? Sports crypto. "It doesn't matter," he screamed. "I need it. You have it. I know you have it in your retirement fund." "That money is for your future," I told him. "It's for when I'm gone." "Well, maybe you're taking too long to go," he had shouted. He had stopped immediately, looking shocked by his own words. He apologized. He cried. He hugged me. I thought it was just the stress talking. I thought he was just a scared boy. Now, lying on a rock in the middle of the Pacific, I realized that was the moment he decided to kill me. It wasn't an outburst. It was a statement of intent. He did not see a father. He saw a piggy bank that refused to break open. I must have passed out from exhaustion because the next thing I knew, the sky was turning a bruised purple. Dawn. I was stiff, my joints locked up like rusted hinges. My mouth felt like it was filled with cotton. I tried to sit up and groaned. My chest was sore, a deep bruise where the heart attack had hit me. I looked down at the cove. The tide had receded, leaving the black rocks glistening and empty. If I had stayed down there, I would have been washed out to sea. I needed to get to the main road. I needed help. But I couldn't walk. My left leg, the one I had injured in the fall, was swollen to twice its size. It was useless. I dragged myself to the edge of the trail, positioning myself where I could be seen if anyone passed by. It was a long shot. This trail wasn't on the tourist maps. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, turning from a source of light into a weapon. It beat down on my exposed skin, burning my scalp, drying out what little moisture I had left. I started to hallucinate. I saw my wife standing at the edge of the trees, waving at me. I saw Terrence as a little boy running toward me with a baseball glove. Then I heard it, a mechanical growl. Not the wind, not the ocean, an engine. It was distant at first, then louder, the sound of tires crunching on gravel. I tried to shout, but my voice was a dry croak. I waved my arm, but it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. A beat-up, rusted Ford truck rounded the bend. It was older than Terrence, covered in mud and dense with fishing rods sticking out of the back. It was moving slowly, bouncing over the ruts. The driver was a massive man. He looked like he was carved out of the same volcanic rock I was lying on. Dark skin, long gray hair, tied-back tattoos covering his arms. He wore a faded tank top and board shorts. He saw me. He slowed down, his eyes narrowing behind sunglasses. He didn't stop immediately. He rolled the truck forward, slowly inspecting me. I knew what he saw. An old black man in dirty, torn resort clothes lying by the side of the road. He probably thought I was a homeless addict or a tourist who had partied too hard and passed out. He stopped the truck about 10 feet away. He leaned out the window. "You looking for a place to sleep it off, Uncle? You picked a bad spot. Tides kill tourists down there." His voice was deep, gravelly. He was about to drive away. I could see his hand shifting the gear. I couldn't speak. I couldn't explain. I did the only thing I could. I used every ounce of strength I had left to rip open the buttons of my linen shirt. I tore it open, exposing my chest. I pointed a shaking finger at the long, vertical scar running down my sternum. The zipper scar. The mark of open-heart surgery. The big man froze. He looked at the scar. Then he looked at my face. He saw the gray pallor of my skin, the blue tint of my lips. He slammed the truck into park and killed the engine. He opened the door and stepped out. He was huge, easily 6'4", but he moved with surprising speed. He knelt beside me, his large hand gently touching my shoulder. He didn't ask if I was drunk anymore. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small, familiar orange bottle. He shook it, the rattle of pills. "I got a ticker too, Uncle," he rumbled softly. "You look like you need one of these more than I do." He popped the cap, took out a tiny white pill, and placed it under my tongue. The taste was bitter sharp and the most beautiful thing I had ever experienced. He uncapped a thermos of water and poured a little into the cap, bringing it to my lips. "Easy," he said. "Not too fast." I drank. The water was cold. It felt like life rushing back into my body. The big man sat back on his heels, watching me with dark, intelligent eyes. He looked at my torn clothes, my lack of shoes, the bruises on my arms. He looked around the empty beach. No car, no bags, just an old man left to die. He looked back at me, and his expression hardened. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. "Someone dropped you off like a stray dog, didn't they?" he asked quietly. I nodded, tears finally leaking from my eyes. "My son," I rasped. "My son." The man's jaw tightened. He stood up and offered me a hand that was the size of a catcher's mitt. "My name is Keone," he said, "and nobody dies on my beach unless I say so. Let's get you up. We have work to do." I grasped his hand. As he pulled me up, I realized I wasn't just being rescued. I was being recruited. And Terrence had no idea what kind of storm was coming his way. The sun rose over the Pacific like a welding torch being lit directly in front of my face. I woke up not to the sound of roosters or the smell of coffee, but to the agonizing sensation of my own skin tightening as it burned. My lips were cracked, splitting down the middle with a metallic taste of dried blood. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt like it was lined with sandpaper. I was still huddled against the rock, my body a stiff, aching cage of broken ribs and bruised muscles. The beauty of Hawaii that the travel brochures promise was gone. In its place was a brutal, indifferent nature that wanted me dead. I watched a crab scuttle sideways near my foot, waiting. I knew that if I did not move soon, I would just be biomass for the ecosystem. I tried to sit up, but the world tilted violently on its axis. My heart fluttered in my chest, a trapped bird battering against a rib cage that could no longer contain it. The angina was back, a dull, heavy weight sitting on my sternum, promising to crush the life out of me if I exerted myself even an inch. I closed my eyes, resigning myself to the fact that this was it. I was going to die here, a dried husk on a nameless beach, while my son ordered room service and toasted to his inheritance. Then I heard it, a mechanical grinding noise. It was the sound of a combustion engine struggling against the terrain. It grew louder, a guttural roar that vibrated through the ground and into my spine. I forced my eyelids open. Through the haze of heat and pain, I saw a battered, rusted Ford Bronco emerging from the jungle trail like a metal beast. It was covered in mud, the suspension lifted, high tires massive and knobby. The truck ground to a halt about 20 feet away. The driver killed the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. A man stepped out. He was immense, a wall of muscle and dark skin, his long gray hair tied back in a salt-stiffened ponytail. He wore board shorts and a faded tank top that exposed arms covered in tribal tattoos. He looked like a warrior from a history book, or maybe a bouncer for a dive bar at the end of the world. He walked toward me, his movements slow and deliberate. He stopped 5 feet away, looking down at me with hidden eyes behind mirrored sunglasses. I saw my own reflection in his lenses. I looked like a corpse that had not finished dying. I saw him wrinkle his nose. He thought I was a drunk. He thought I was some tourist who had passed out after a night of partying on the beach. He shook his head, a gesture of disgust, and turned his back to walk away. Number 1. I tried to shout, but it came out as a pathetic croak. I could not let him leave. This was my only chance. I summoned every ounce of adrenaline left in my adrenal glands. My hands, shaking uncontrollably, fumbled with the buttons of my ruined linen shirt. I ripped them open, the fabric tearing. I pushed myself up on one elbow, gasping as pain shot through my chest and exposed my torso. I pointed a trembling finger at the center of my chest. There, running down my sternum, was the zipper, the long, pale vertical scar of open-heart surgery. It was the mark of a survivor, the membership card to a club nobody wants to join. The big man stopped. He had seen it. He turned back around, lifting his sunglasses. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and suddenly they were filled with recognition. He looked from the scar to my gray face, to my blue-tinged lips. He knew. He knew exactly what was happening because he had seen it before. He did not say a word. He moved with a speed that belied his size. He rushed back to his truck and grabbed a small cooler and a first aid kit. He knelt beside me in the sand, his knees sinking into the grit. "Easy, uncle," he rumbled, his voice deep, like stones rolling underwater. "Do not try to talk. You are redlining." He opened the first aid kit, but he did not reach for bandages. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. He shook it. The rattle of pills was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. "I am Keone," he said. "I got a bad ticker too. You look like you need this more than I do right now." He popped the cap and tipped a tiny white tablet into his massive palm. He carefully placed it under my tongue. Nitroglycerin. The taste was bitter, sharp, and chemical. I closed my eyes as it dissolved. Within seconds, I felt the blood vessels in my heart dilating, the crushing weight on my chest beginning to lift just a fraction. It was like someone had opened a valve, allowing life to flow back into my extremities. Keone opened a thermos of ice water. He poured a small amount into the cap and held it to my lips. "Small sips," he commanded gently. "Do not vomit." The water was cold, shocking my system. I drank greedily, but he pulled the cap away. "Wait. Let it settle." I lay back against the rock, breathing easier. The shadow of death had retreated a few steps. I looked up at Keone. He was watching me intently, analyzing me. He was not just a fisherman. There was a sharpness in his gaze, a calculating intelligence that reminded me of the Port Authority inspectors I used to deal with. "Why did you stop?" I whispered, my voice sounding like gravel in a mixer. He capped the water. "I saw the zipper," he said simply. "Drunks do not have zippers. Men who survive that surgery do not come out here to die by accident." He looked around the empty beach. No car, no supplies, no footprints leading away. "You are a long way from the hotel, uncle, and you did not walk here." I nodded weakly. "My son," I rasped. The words tasted like ash. "My son brought me here." Keone's jaw tightened. A muscle in his cheek twitched. He looked out at the ocean, his expression hardening into something cold and dangerous. "Kids today," he muttered. "They think the world owes them everything. They think we are just ATM machines that breathe." He looked back at me. "He left you for the tide, didn't he? High tide covers these rocks. He wanted you washed out." I nodded again, shame burning hotter than the sun on my face. It was a humiliation to admit that my own flesh and blood, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, had discarded me like a bag of trash. Keone let out a heavy sigh. He reached out and gripped my shoulder. His hand was heavy grounding. "He made a mistake," Keone said. "He did not check the tide charts. Or maybe the ocean just did not want you yet. Either way, you are my problem now, and I solve my problems." He stood up and looked at his truck. "We cannot go to the hospital," he said. "The nearest one is an hour away on the main road. The ride is rough. In your condition, the bouncing might trigger another attack before we get there. And if we go to the hospital, the police get involved. Police mean reports. Reports mean your son finds out you are alive before you are ready." He looked down at me. "Do you want him to know you are alive, or do you want to catch him?" The question hung in the hot air. I thought of Terrence's face as he drove away. I thought of Courtney's smirk. I thought of the note on the lottery ticket. If I went to the police now, Terrence would claim it was a misunderstanding. He would claim I wandered off. He would play the grieving, confused son. He might even get away with it. "No," I whispered, "not yet." Keone nodded. "Good. Then we go to my place. I have oxygen. I have better meds. We get you stable. Then we figure out how to gut the little fish." He lifted me up as if I weighed nothing. He carried me to the truck and placed me in the passenger seat, reclining it as far back as it would go. The truck smelled of old leather, salt, and diesel. It smelled like work. It smelled like safety. As we bounced along the trail, heading deeper into the jungle away from the main road, I realized something. Keone wasn't just a Samaritan. He was angry. He took this personally. "Do you have a phone?" I asked, my voice gaining a little strength from the medicine. Keone reached into the glove box and pulled out a heavy black device with a thick antenna, a satellite phone. This was not a toy. This was serious equipment. "Cell towers do not reach where I live," he said. "Use this." I took the phone. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clearing. The engineer in me was waking up. I needed data. I needed to know the status of the system. I dialed the number for my bank. It was a number I had memorized 20 years ago. I put the phone to my ear, listening to the digital rings bouncing off a satellite in space. "Welcome to First National," the automated voice said. "Please enter your account number." I keyed in the numbers. My fingers felt clumsy, but I managed. "Please enter your PIN." I entered it. The silence as the system processed my request felt longer than the night I had just survived. Main menu. For balance, press 1. For recent transactions, press 2. I pressed 2. Pending transactions, the voice said, devoid of any emotion. My heart skipped a beat. One pending transfer in the amount of $450,000 to account ending in 409. Status. Pending authorization. Reason. High-value transfer requiring verbal confirmation or 48-hour clearing period. Pending. The word was the sweetest thing I had ever heard. It was Tuesday. Or maybe it was Wednesday. I had lost track of time. But the bank had flagged it. It was a large amount. They were waiting. They were waiting for me to call, or they were waiting for the time limit to expire. Terrence and Courtney were waiting too. They were sitting in their hotel room watching the clock, waiting for that money to hit their account so they could pay off their debts and fly home. They thought I was dead. They thought there was no one left to stop the transfer. They were wrong. I looked at Keone. He was watching me driving with one hand on the wheel. They tried to move the money. I said, my voice cold. "It is pending." Keone smiled, a grim, wolfish baring of teeth. "Then they are not going anywhere," he said. "People who are waiting for $500,000 do not leave the island. We have them trapped." I looked at the satellite phone. I could cancel the transfer right now. I could freeze the account. But if I did that, Terrence would get a notification. He would know something was wrong. He might run. He might disappear. I needed to be smarter. I needed to freeze it without them knowing. I needed to let them believe the money was coming until the very last second. I ended the call. I did not cancel the transfer yet. I needed a lawyer. I needed Kenji. Keone turned the truck onto a paved private driveway that was hidden behind a wall of ferns. We climbed higher away from the beach toward the top of the ridge. "Where are we going?" I asked. "My house," Keone said. We broke through the tree line. I gasped. I expected a shack. I expected a fisherman's hut. What I saw was a fortress. A sprawling modern compound of glass and steel perched on the edge of the cliff overlooking the entire ocean. It was a masterpiece of engineering. There were solar arrays, rain catchments, and a helipad. Keone saw my expression and chuckled. "I fish for fun, Uncle," he said. "I made my money in land development. I own this mountain, and I own the beach your son left you on." He stopped the truck in front of the massive double doors. "Welcome to headquarters, Solomon. Let's get you cleaned up. We have a war to plan." I looked at the man who had saved me. He wasn't just a local with a truck. He was a titan hiding in plain sight. Just like me. My son had abandoned a retired logistics manager. He was about to face a team of two angry, wealthy old men with nothing to lose and millions of dollars at their disposal. I gripped the satellite phone. The pain in my chest was still there, but it was different now. It wasn't the pain of dying. It was the pain of a heart beating for vengeance. "I am ready," I said. Keone nodded. "Good, because the news cycle starts at 6 and I think you are going to be the headline." I gripped the satellite phone tight enough to crack the plastic casing. My finger hovered over the emergency dial button. It was the logical next step. It was the safe step. Call the police. Report the attempted murder. Watch them drag Terrence away in handcuffs while I sat safely in a hospital bed. It was the procedure I had followed my entire life. Follow the rules. Trust the system. But a massive hand clamped over my wrist. It was not violent, but it was immovable. Keone kept his eyes on the winding private road, but his grip on my arm was iron. "Put the phone down, Solomon." I stared at him. "Are you crazy? They tried to kill me. They left me for the tide. That is attempted murder. I am calling the cops." Keone shook his head slowly. The truck lurched over a final bump before the road smoothed out into pristine blacktop. "Think like an engineer, not like a victim. What happens if you call the police right now? They go to the hotel, they knock on the door. Your son answers. He looks shocked. He cries. He says, 'Oh, thank God, my father is alive.' He wandered off. He has been confused lately. We were so worried." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died in my throat. I knew Terrence. I knew Courtney. They were liars by trade. They would spin it. Keone continued, his voice low and hard. "The cops will believe the young crying couple over the dehydrated, confused old man with a heart condition. They will release you into their custody. They will take you back to that hotel. And tonight, they will not make the same mistake. They will not drive you to a beach. They will overdose your meds in the hotel room. Or you will slip in the bathtub. Or you will have a tragic heart attack in your sleep. And this time, there will be no tide to wait for. They will finish the job, and they will cremate you before an autopsy can be done." The horror of his logic washed over me colder than the ocean spray. He was right. If I went back now, I was just giving them a second chance to kill me. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "Do I just let them go? Do I let them think they won?" Keone steered the truck through a massive gate that slid open silently. "No, we do not let them go. We let them think they won. We let them sit in that hotel room ordering champagne and counting your money. We keep them on the island. And when the trap snaps shut, we make sure there is no wiggle room. No, he wandered off excuses. We catch them with their hands in the cookie jar and the blood on their shirts." The truck came to a stop. I looked up and gasped. We were not at a fishing shack. We were not at a cabin. We were parked in front of a sprawling architectural masterpiece of glass, steel, and volcanic rock that seemed to grow directly out of the cliffside. It was a fortress of modern luxury hidden from the world by a curtain of jungle. I looked at Keone. "Who are you?" I whispered. "Fishermen do not live in $20 million compounds." Keone killed the engine. He turned to me, removing his sunglasses for the first time. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and filled with a pain that mirrored my own. "I told you I own the beach, Solomon. I also own the resort your son is staying at. I own the construction company that built the highway we drove in on. I am not a fisherman. I am the reason this part of the island has power and water." He opened his door and walked around to help me out. As I stepped onto the slate driveway, I felt small. I was a man who had made a good living, but this was empire money. "Why help me?" I asked as we walked toward the massive double doors made of koa wood. "You could have called a helicopter. You could have handed me off to your security team. Why drive me here yourself?" Keone stopped his hand on the biometric scanner of the front door. The lock clicked open with a heavy thud. Because 5 years ago my niece tried to declare me incompetent, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. She said I was too old to manage the company. She said I was losing my edge. She tried to force me into a facility in Honolulu so she could sell off the land to foreign developers. He pushed the door open, revealing a foyer with ceilings 30 feet high and art that belonged in a museum. I fought her, Keone said. I destroyed her legal team. I cut her out of the will. But it broke something inside me. I recognize the look in your eyes, Solomon. It is the look of a man who realizes his love was wasted. It is the look of a man who realizes he raised a wolf. He turned to me, a grim smile playing on his lips. Us old lions need to stick together. Your son made a mistake. He did not just mess with you. He messed with a guest of Keone Alana, and on my island that is a fatal error. He led me into a massive living room overlooking the ocean. Sit, he commanded, pointing to a white leather sofa. Rest. I have a medical suite in the East Wing. My private doctor is on his way. But first we need to make a call. He handed me the satellite phone again. Call your lawyer, not the police. The lawyer. We need to freeze that money, but we need to do it carefully. If the transfer is rejected, they run. If the transfer is pending, they stay. I took the phone. My hands were steady now. The engineer was back in control. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Honolulu Law. Kenji Tanaka speaking. Kenji, I said. It is Solomon. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. Solomon. Kenji's voice was a whisper. My God. Terrence called me 3 hours ago. He said you were missing. He said you went for a walk and never came back. He was crying, Solomon. He asked about the will. He asked about the probate timeline. Of course he did. He was following the script. Kenji, listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice cold and hard. I am alive. But Terrence cannot know that. Not yet. Solomon, where are you? Do I need to call the police? No police, Kenji. Not yet. Listen. Terrence initiated a transfer. $450,000. It is currently pending. I can reject it immediately, Kenji said, his professional tone snapping back. I can flag it as fraud. No, I commanded. Do not reject it. If you reject it, he gets a notification. He panics. He leaves the island. Then what do you want me to do? I want a shadow freeze, Kenji. Call the bank. Tell them I am authorizing a security review. Tell them to keep the status as processing. Tell them to tell Terrence it is a standard delay for large amounts. Make him think the money is coming. Make him think it is just bureaucratic red tape. I could hear Kenji typing furiously in the background. A shadow freeze. Okay, I can do that. I will tell the bank manager it is a verbal hold pending physical verification. The app will just show the spinning wheel of death for him. He will stay glued to his phone waiting for it to clear. Exactly, I said. Keep him here, Kenji. Keep him looking at his phone. Keep him ordering room service. I need 48 hours. 48 hours for what, Solomon? To rise from the dead, I said. And Kenji. Yes, Solomon. Draft a new will and get the papers ready for the sale of my house in Baltimore. I am not going back there. You are selling the house. I am selling everything, Kenji. If he wants my money, he can watch me burn it. I hung up the phone. I looked at Keone. He was standing by the window pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He walked over and handed me a glass. To bad sons, he said, raising his glass. To bad sons, I replied. I took a sip. It burned going down. It felt good. Now Keone said, sitting opposite me. Let us look at the security footage from the resort. I hacked their system 10 minutes ago. Let us see what your grieving son is doing right now. He picked up a tablet and swiped the screen. The image flickered to life. It showed the poolside bar at the resort. There was Terrence. He was wearing swim trunks and sunglasses. He was holding a cocktail with a little umbrella in it. He was laughing. He was flirting with a waitress. He did not look like a man whose father was missing. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. I watched him on the screen, my own flesh and blood, and I felt the last vestiges of fatherly love wither and die in my chest. Keone watched me closely. Are you ready to destroy him, Solomon? I took another sip of the whiskey. I watched Terrence laugh on the screen, unaware that the man he killed was watching him from a fortress on the hill. I am not going to destroy him, I said, my voice flat. I am going to erase him, just like he tried to erase me. Keone grinned. Good. I have a tailor coming in an hour. If you are going to be a dead billionaire, you need to dress the part. I leaned back against the leather sofa. The pain in my chest was gone, replaced by a cold clarity. The game had changed. Terrence was playing checkers with a dead man. I was playing chess with a king. While I sat in a fortress of glass and steel, sipping aged whiskey and plotting my resurrection, my son and his wife were busy celebrating my death. Keone had hacked into the internal security feed of the Princeville Resort. It was a terrifying display of power, but right now it was exactly what I needed. On the high-definition screen, I watched them sitting at the best table in the resort's open-air seafood restaurant. The sun was setting, painting the sky in the same brilliant oranges and purples that I had watched fade into darkness on that beach. But they were not watching the sunset. They were watching a waiter debone a 3-pound lobster at their table. Terrence looked nervous at first. He kept glancing around the restaurant as if he expected the police to burst in at any moment. He was tapping his foot, a nervous tic he had since he was a child. But Courtney looked radiant. She was glowing. She wore a white dress that showed off her tan, and she was laughing at something the waiter said. There was not a shred of guilt on her face. There was only relief. She looked like a woman who had just dropped a heavy bag of trash at the curb and was washing her hands of the grime. The audio feed from the camera was faint, but Keone adjusted some levels on his tablet, and suddenly their voices filled the room. It was ghostly hearing them speak while I sat miles away, alive and breathing. "I cannot believe we pulled it off," Terrence whispered, leaning across the table. His voice was shaky, but there was a greedy edge to it. "Do you think he is gone? Do you think it is over?" Courtney took a sip of wine. It was a bottle of Chateau Margaux. I recognized the label. That bottle cost $500. My money. "Relax, baby," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "The tide came in at 10 last night. The waves were huge. I checked the surf report. By now your father is crab bait. He is probably floating 10 miles offshore. The fish are having a better dinner than we are." I flinched. Even after everything, even after the betrayal, hearing her say it so callously felt like a physical blow. Crab bait. That was all I was to her. Biomass. Terrence shuddered, but he picked up a piece of lobster, dipped it in butter, and put it in his mouth. He chewed slowly, and then he smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was there. "You are right," he said. "It is done. No more lectures, no more begging for loans, no more feeling like a disappointment." Courtney raised her glass. "To us," she said. "To the future. To the inheritance." "To us," Terrence agreed, clinking his glass against hers. I watched them drink. I watched them eat. I watched them wipe butter from their lips with linen napkins. They were feasting on my corpse. They were celebrating their liberation, but they did not know they were toasting to their own execution. Every bite they took, every sip of wine was just another nail in the coffin I was building for them. Keone looked at me, his face grim. "You need to see this, Solomon," he said quietly. "You need to see who they really are when they think nobody is watching. This is the fuel you will need for what comes next." I nodded. I did not look away. I memorized every smile, every laugh, every casual gesture of indifference. I let the hate harden in my chest, replacing the broken pieces of my heart. They were enjoying the high life, but the bill was coming due, and it was going to be much higher than they could afford. After dinner, they did not go back to their room to mourn. They did not sit in silence contemplating the gravity of patricide. No. They went shopping. The resort had a row of high-end boutiques, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, Hermes, the kinds of places where the price tags are hidden because if you have to ask, you cannot afford it. Courtney marched toward them with the determination of a general invading a country. Terrence followed a few steps behind, looking at the displays with hungry eyes. They walked into the Hermes store. The sales assistant, a young woman with a polite smile, greeted them. Courtney did not even look at her. She walked straight to a display case and pointed at a handbag. It was a Birkin, orange leather, gold hardware. I knew enough about luxury goods to know that bag cost more than my first car. "I want to see that one," Courtney demanded. The assistant hesitated. "That is a display model, ma'am. These bags are usually reserved for our waitlist clients." Courtney laughed. A harsh barking sound. "I do not want to wait," she said. "I want to buy it now. My husband is very wealthy. He just came into a large inheritance." She looked at Terrence. He puffed out his chest, trying to look the part of the grieving billionaire. "Get it for me, Terry," she purred. "You owe me. I did the hard part. I made the plan." Terrence nodded. He pulled out a black credit card from his wallet. I leaned closer to the screen. It was not his card, it was my card. The supplementary platinum card I had given him for emergencies only. Emergencies like a flat tire or a hospital bill, not a $20,000 handbag. My phone, which was sitting on the table next to the satellite phone, buzzed. It was a notification from my bank app. Transaction attempted. Hermes Resort Boutique. Amount $22,500. Approve or deny. I looked at Keone. He was watching me, his finger hovering over the tablet. If you deny it, they will know, he said. They will know the card is active but monitored. They might get spooked. They might run. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the deny button. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to see the humiliation on Courtney's face when the card was declined. I wanted to see the sales assistant take the bag away. But that was small thinking. That was petty revenge. I wanted total destruction. Let it go through, I said, my voice cold. Let them dig the hole deeper. That is grand larceny. That is fraud. When the police see this receipt, it will just be another 10 years on their sentence. I pressed approve. On the screen, I saw Terrence swipe the card. He held his breath. I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. He was terrified it would decline. He was terrified the machine would beep and the police would jump out from the back room. The machine chirped. Approved. Terrence let out a long, shaky breath. He smiled at the assistant. Wrap it up, he said, his voice arrogant now that the danger had passed. And throw in a scarf, Courtney squealed. She actually squealed like a child on Christmas morning. She grabbed the bag, hugging it to her chest. She kissed Terrence on the cheek. You are the best, she said. See, I told you it would be fine. The old man is gone. The money is ours. Nobody is watching. Terrence, feeling emboldened, walked over to the jewelry counter. He pointed at a watch. A Rolex Submariner. Heavy. Gold. Flashy. I will take that too, he said. I need something to remember this trip by. I watched as he swiped my card again. Another notification on my phone. $15,000. Approved. They walked out of the store swinging their shopping bags looking like royalty. They were drunk on power, drunk on theft, drunk on the adrenaline of getting away with murder. They thought they were untouchable. They thought the world belonged to them. But their victory lap was about to hit a wall. As they walked back toward the hotel lobby, Terrence's cell phone rang. He stopped. He pulled it out of his pocket and looked at the screen. The color drained from his face instantly. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a sheer primal terror. He looked at Courtney. She was busy admiring her new bag and did not notice. Terrence stepped away, moving into the shadow of a palm tree. Keone tapped the screen. I can tap into his phone microphone, he said. Do you want to hear? Yes, I said. The audio crackled, and then Terrence's voice came through, whispering frantic. I told you I do not have it yet. It is pending. The bank says 48 hours. No, please do not come here. A voice on the other end, loud and distorted by the speaker, yelled back. I do not care about pending, Terrence. You said Tuesday. It is Tuesday. I have guys on the island. They are watching you right now. They see you shopping. They see the bags. If you have money for Rolexes, you have money for me. No, that is credit. Terrence pleaded, tears starting to form in his eyes. That is not cash. I need the transfer to clear to get you the cash. Please, Vinny, just give me 2 more days. My father is gone. The money is coming. I swear on my life. Your life is not worth 200 grand, Terrence, the voice growled. You have until midnight tomorrow. If the money is not in my account, I am not sending guys to break your legs. I am sending them to cut your Achilles tendons. You will never walk again. Do you understand? Midnight. The call ended. Terrence stood there in the shadows, shaking uncontrollably. He looked at the Rolex on his wrist as if it were a shackle. He looked at Courtney, who was waiting for him, impatiently tapping her foot. He wiped his face, trying to compose himself. He put on a fake smile, a mask of confidence that was cracking at the edges. He walked back to his wife. Who was that? She asked, suspicious. Just work. Terrence lied. They needed a password. It is fine. Work, she scoffed. You do not have a job, Terrence. Do not lie to me. Too. I am not lying, he snapped, his voice rising. Let's just go to the room. I am tired. I sat back in the leather sofa at Keone's house. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. The desperation, the rush, the sloppy execution of the murder. Terrence wasn't just a greedy son, he was a hunted man. He had borrowed money from sharks and now he was feeding them his own father to save his skin. $200,000. That was the price of my life. That was what I was worth to him. I looked at Keone. "He is scared," I said. "Good," Keone replied. "Scared men make mistakes. Scared men run into traps." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark ocean. Somewhere out there the tide was rising again, washing over the rocks where I was supposed to die. "He has until midnight tomorrow," I said. "That gives us 24 hours. 24 hours to set the stage." Keone agreed. I touched the scar on my chest. "Get the tailor," I said, "and call the TV station. If my son wants a show, we are going to give him the performance of a lifetime." The game was no longer about survival. It was about timing. Terrence was being squeezed from both sides, the loan sharks on one end and his dead father on the other. He was trapped in a vice and I was about to turn the handle. The screen glowed with the high-definition feed from the Princeville Resort Spa. It was a place of soft lighting, scented candles, and muted music designed to wash away the cares of the world. And there, lying face down on a massage table with a white towel draped over his lower back, was my son. Terrence was getting a hot stone massage. I watched in a silence that was louder than any scream. While I had been drinking rainwater from taro leaves and fighting off a heart attack on a jagged rock, he was having volcanic stones placed on his spine to align his chakras. He looked relaxed. His eyes were closed. His breathing was deep and even. Keone stood beside me, his arms crossed over his massive chest. He didn't say anything. He knew there were no words for this. I reached into my pocket, the one in the borrowed shorts Keone had given me. My fingers brushed against a small, water-damaged square of photo paper. It was the only thing I had managed to keep hidden in my pocket when Courtney took my bag. It was a picture of Terrence and me at his college graduation. I was beaming my arm around his shoulders, so proud that my boy had made it. He was smiling too, looking like he had the world at his feet. I pulled the photo out. The edges were frayed, the colors bleeding from the seawater and sweat. I looked at the young man in the picture, the boy I had raised, the boy I had protected from every hard knock life tried to throw at him. Then I looked at the man on the screen, the man who was currently asking the masseuse to focus on his shoulders, because he carried a lot of stress. Stress. The stress of murder. The stress of waiting for a bank transfer. I stood up and walked to the fireplace where a small gas flame danced over glass rocks. It was a decorative fire, clean and controlled, much like the life I was about to dismantle. I held the photo over the flame. I didn't hesitate. I didn't cry. I watched the edges curl and blacken. I watched the image of my smiling face bubble and melt. I watched the image of my son turn into ash and smoke. It wasn't just a piece of paper burning. It was Solomon the father. It was the man who forgave the man who made excuses, the man who bailed his son out again and again. That man died on the beach. The man who stood in front of the fire was someone else. I was Solomon the Punisher. I was a force of nature, cold and unyielding as the tide that was supposed to kill me. I dropped the last corner of the photo into the fire and watched it disappear. I turned back to Keone. The sadness was gone from my eyes. There was only the mission. Keone nodded, understanding perfectly. He tapped a command on his tablet, and the screen went black, cutting off the image of my son's relaxation. "It is time," Keone said. We moved to the study, a room that looked more like a war room than a home office. Maps of the island covered one wall. Schematics of the port infrastructure covered another. Keone had not been idle while I recovered. He had been busy planting seeds. "I have already leaked the information to my contacts at the Chamber of Commerce," Keone said, pointing to a list of names on a whiteboard. "Rumors travel faster than light on this island." By noon, everyone who matters knew that a silent investor from the mainland had arrived, a logistics titan, a man who specializes in deep water port restructuring. He looked at me. "That is you, Solomon. We are not inventing a new person. We are just amplifying who you really are. You are a logistics expert. You know the shipping lanes better than anyone. We are just adding a few zeros to your bank account in the public eye." I nodded. The cover story was solid because it was based on truth. I could talk shop with any engineer or politician for hours. I didn't need to fake the knowledge, just the net worth. Keone pressed a button on his desk and the double doors opened. 3 people walked in. A barber, a tailor, and a woman holding a metal briefcase. We have 4 hours until the evening news broadcast, Keone announced. You need to look like $5 million cash. The next few hours were a whirlwind of transformation. The barber trimmed my gray hair close, giving me a sharp military-grade cut that emphasized the hardness of my face. He shaved the stubble from my jaw, leaving my skin smooth and smelling of sandalwood. The tailor was an Italian man who didn't speak much but moved with the precision of a surgeon. He measured my shoulders, my inseam, my neck. He brought out a suit that was a work of art. It was a charcoal gray three-piece cut from Italian wool so fine it felt like silk. It wasn't the kind of suit you wear to a meeting. It was the kind of suit you wear to own the meeting. I put it on. It fit like armor. The white shirt was crisp and stiff. The tie was a deep blood red. I looked in the mirror. The man looking back wasn't the tired retiree who had begged for his pills. He was a shark. He was a man who ate weak suns for breakfast. The woman with the briefcase stepped forward. She opened it to reveal a collection of watches that probably cost more than my house in Baltimore. Keone pointed to one. That one. She lifted it out. A Patek Philippe Nautilus, stainless steel, blue face. It was understated elegance, the kind of watch that whispered money rather than shouting it. I fastened it around my wrist. The weight of it was grounding. Keone handed me a pair of shoes. Hand-stitched leather Oxfords polished to a mirror shine. I put them on. I stood up straight, ignoring the ache in my ribs. I felt taller. I felt dangerous. Keone looked me up and down and smiled. Now that is a man I would be afraid to cross, he said. We walked out to the terrace. A news crew van was already driving up the winding road. Keone had called in a favor with the station manager, an exclusive interview with the mysterious investor who was going to save the local shipping industry. It was the perfect bait. While the crew set up the lights and cameras against the backdrop of the stunning Pacific Ocean, I sat in a chair reviewing the talking points Keone had prepared. It was a simple script. Talk about infrastructure. Talk about investment. Talk about the future. But my mind was not on the port. My mind was on the hotel room where Terrence was currently waking up from his nap, checking his phone for a bank notification that would never come. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the terrace. The air was thick with humidity and tension. "We go live in 10 minutes," the producer called out. I closed my eyes for a second, centering myself. I was about to give the performance of my life. Meanwhile, 10 miles away, the atmosphere in the hotel suite was very different. Keone had the audio feed playing in his earpiece, and he relayed the scene to me. Terrence was pacing the room. He had checked his bank app 50 times in the last hour. The spinning wheel of death was still spinning. Transaction pending. Security review. What is taking so long? He was muttering, his voice rising in pitch. It has been 48 hours. It should have cleared. Courtney was sitting on the bed, filing her nails, trying to maintain her composure, but failing. "Stop pacing, Terrence. You are making me nervous. It is just a delay. Banks are slow." "It is not just a delay," Terrence snapped. Vinny texted me again. He sent a picture of our house in Baltimore. He knows where we live. He knows we are not there. "Relax," Courtney said, though her voice wavered. "Your dad is gone. There is no one to stop the transfer. It is automatic. We just have to wait." "Wait," Terrence laughed hysterically. "I don't have time to wait." "Midnight, Courtney. Midnight tonight." He grabbed a bottle of vodka from the minibar and took a swig straight from the bottle. "Maybe we should call the bank," he said. "No," Courtney hissed. "Do not call the bank. If you call, you sound suspicious. Just let it process." They sat there in that luxurious room, trapped in a cage of their own making. The air conditioning was humming, but they were sweating. They were watching the clock on the wall, the second hand ticking away the moments of their lives. Tick, tick, tick. They were waiting for money. They were waiting for salvation. I was waiting for the red light on the camera. 5, 4, 3, 2. The producer counted down, pointing a finger at me. The red light blinked on. I looked directly into the lens. I didn't smile, I didn't blink. I looked through the glass, through the airwaves, through the screen of the TV in that hotel room, and stared directly into my son's soul. "Good evening," I said, my voice deep and steady. "My name is Solomon Hayes, and I am here to talk about the future. The trap was set, the bait was in the water, and the sharks were hungry." The air conditioning in the luxury suite at the Princeville Resort was set to 68 degrees, a frigid artificial chill that contrasted sharply with the humid tropical night outside. Inside the room, the atmosphere was suffocatingly tense. Terrence and Courtney sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, surrounded by the detritus of their nervous waiting. Empty room service trays were stacked on the floor, remnants of half-eaten burgers and wilted salads. A bottle of expensive champagne sat in a bucket of melted ice unopened. They were saving it for the confirmation. They were waiting for a body. Terrence held the remote control in a hand that would not stop shaking. He kept flipping between local channels, his eyes bloodshot and frantic. He was looking for the breaking news banner. He was desperate to hear the words, "Unidentified elderly man found on North Shore Beach." He needed that closure. He needed to know that the loose end he had created was tied off permanently. Courtney paced the room, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment back in Baltimore. She stopped by the window, looking out at the darkness where the ocean roared invisibly. "Stop flipping the channels, Terrence," she snapped, her voice tight with anxiety. "You are making me dizzy. If they found him, it would be on every channel. It is a small island. Dead tourists make headlines." "Maybe they have not found him yet," Terrence muttered, stopping on the local KHON2 news station. "Maybe the tide took him out further than we thought. Maybe he is just gone." "That is the best-case scenario," she said, turning back to him. "No body means no investigation. We just file a missing persons report tomorrow. We act sad. We fly home. And when the 7 years are up, we declare him dead in absentia." "I cannot wait 7 years," Courtney Terrence shouted, his voice cracking. "Vinny needs his money by midnight. If that transfer does not clear, I am a dead man. I need a death certificate to access the life insurance immediately if the bank transfer gets blocked." "Relax," Courtney hissed. "The transfer is pending. It is just a security hold. Once the bank opens tomorrow and he does not call to cancel it, it will go through. He is not calling anyone Terrence. He is fish food." She walked over to the minibar and poured herself a glass of red wine. Her hand was steady, but her eyes betrayed her fear. They were trapped in a gilded cage, waiting for a ghost to stop haunting them. On the television, the news anchor, a polished woman with a hibiscus flower behind her ear, smiled professionally. "Coming up next," she said, her voice chipper, "a major announcement for the island's economy. A mysterious investor steps forward with a plan to revitalize the shipping infrastructure of Kauai. But first, let us look at the weather." Terrence groaned and leaned back against the headboard. "I do not care about the shipping infrastructure," he whined. "Where is the crime report? Where are the accidents?" "Just wait," Courtney said, sipping her wine. "It is the 6 o'clock news. They saved the bodies for the B block." They sat there in the cold blue light of the television screen, two predators waiting to confirm their kill. They had no idea that the predator was actually hunting them. The commercial break ended. The news anchor reappeared. The graphic behind her changed. It showed a sleek, modern cargo ship and a map of the Hanalei Bay. "Breaking news," she announced. "We interrupt our regular programming for a live press conference from the private estate of local tycoon Keone Alana. In a stunning development, Mr. Alana has announced a partnership with a mainland logistics expert to overhaul our aging port system. This deal is rumored to be worth over $50 million. Terrence reached for the remote to change the channel. He did not care about business news. "Wait," Courtney said sharply. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. "Look at that!" The camera cut to a live feed. It showed the terrace of Keone's mansion, the same terrace I was standing on. The ocean was a dark backdrop behind a podium bristling with microphones. Keone stood there looking impressive in a loose white shirt, but he was not the focus. Standing next to him was a man in a charcoal gray Italian suit that fit like a second skin. He wore a Patek Philippe watch that caught the glare of the television lights. His hair was trimmed close, sharp, and military. He stood tall, his shoulders back, his expression one of absolute command. Terrence dropped the remote. It hit the floor with a plastic clatter, but neither of them noticed. The camera zoomed in. The chyron at the bottom of the screen flashed. Solomon Hayes, logistics expert and investor. The man on the screen looked like Solomon Hayes. He had the same face, the same eyes. But he was not the father Terrence knew. This was not the tired, retired man who begged for $50 to fix his porch. This was not the man who had pleaded for his heart medication on a dirt road 24 hours ago. This man was a titan. He radiated power. He radiated wealth. He looked like he owned the island. The man on the screen leaned into the microphone. His voice, deep and steady, filled the hotel room. "Good evening, citizens of Kauai. My name is Solomon Hayes. I have spent 40 years moving the world's goods. I know how to build bridges and I know how to burn them. Courtney's hand went limp. The glass of red wine slipped from her fingers. It shattered on the hardwood floor, sending a spray of crimson liquid across the white rug like a splatter of blood. She did not move. She did not look down. She just stared at the television, her mouth hanging open in a silent scream of disbelief. Terrence scrambled backward on the bed, pushing himself up against the headboard until he had nowhere left to go. He was shaking, his eyes wide with a terror that transcended the fear of loan sharks. This was a primal fear, the fear of seeing a ghost. "No," he whispered. "No, that is impossible. He is dead. We left him. He had no water. He had no pills." On the screen, I continued to speak, my eyes looking directly into the camera lens, directly into my son's soul. "I am here to invest in the future," I said. "But before we build the new, we must clear away the rot of the old. I believe in accountability. I believe that debts must be paid." Terrence let out a high-pitched whimper. He grabbed his hair, pulling at it as if trying to wake himself from a nightmare. "He is wearing a $5,000 suit," Courtney whispered, her voice trembling. "Look at that watch, Terrence. That is a Nautilus. That is $100,000. Where did he get that?" "He is supposed to be dead," Terrence screamed. He threw a pillow at the television, but it just bounced off harmlessly. "Why isn't he dead?" The news anchor came back on screen looking impressed. "Mr. Hayes has announced that he will be personally overseeing the audit of the local supply chains," she said. "He has a reputation for being ruthless with inefficiency and corruption." Terrence scrambled off the bed, slipping in the puddle of wine. He fell to his knees, his expensive resort clothes soaking up the red stain. He crawled toward the TV, staring at my face. "It is a trick," he babbled. "It is a pre-recorded video. It is a deepfake." Then on the screen, I did something that shattered his last delusion. I looked at my watch. "It is 6:15 p.m. on Tuesday," I said. "The sun has just set. It is a beautiful night for justice." Tuesday, live. Terrence collapsed on the floor. He curled into a ball, sobbing. He knows, he moaned. He knows everything. He is not just alive, Courtney. He is rich. He is powerful. And he is coming for us. Courtney stared at the screen, her mind racing. She was a survivor, a parasite who knew when the host was fighting back. "He never told us," she whispered. "He had millions. He had millions, and we tried to kill him for a few 100,000. She looked down at her husband, crying on the floor covered in wine. Her expression shifted from shock to pure, unadulterated hatred. "You idiot," she hissed. "You told me he was broke. You told me he was a retired nobody. You said he was an easy mark." "I didn't know," Terrence wailed. "I didn't know." The phone on the bedside table rang. It was a harsh, jarring sound that made them both jump. It wasn't the hotel phone. It was Terrence's cell phone. He looked at it. The screen displayed a restricted number. "It is Vinny," he whispered. "It is the Sharks." He looked at the TV where I was shaking hands with the governor. He looked at the phone. He was caught between a hammer and an anvil. "Answer it," Courtney commanded. "Maybe we can get the money from your dad. If he is alive and rich, maybe we can just ask him. Maybe we can say we got lost. Maybe we can say it was a misunderstanding." She was delusional, clinging to the last shreds of her manipulation tactics. She truly believed she could talk her way out of attempted murder. Terrence reached for the phone, his hand shaking so bad he almost dropped it. He pressed answer. "Hello," he whispered. The voice on the other end was not Vinny. It was a voice he knew better than his own. "Hello, son." It was me. I had stepped away from the podium while the governor spoke. I was calling him live from the terrace. Terrence froze. He looked at the TV. He saw me holding a phone to my ear in the background of the shot. "Dad," Terrence choked out. "Dad, oh my God. We were so worried. Where are you?" "We looked everywhere." "Cut the crap, Terrence," I said, my voice cold steel. "I am watching you. I know about Vinny. I know about the 200 grand. And I know about the tide. Dad, please," Terrence begged. "I can explain." "You have until midnight, Terrence," I said. "Vinny is coming, and I am not going to stop him." I hung up. On the screen, I put the phone away and walked back to the podium, smiling for the cameras. In the hotel room, the silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of Terrence's breathing, which sounded like a dying animal. The panic had set in. The walls were closing in. They were not just caught. They were doomed. The silence in the hotel room was shattered by the ping of a cell phone notification. It was a cheerful sound, the default chime for a banking app, but in the suffocating atmosphere of the suite, it sounded like a gavel striking a judge's bench. Terrence scrambled for his phone, his fingers slick with sweat and spilled wine. He unlocked the screen, hoping against hope to see a deposit confirmation. He needed to see a balance of $450,000. He needed salvation. Instead, he saw a red banner across the top of the screen. Account frozen. Security alert. Please contact the primary account holder immediately. His breath hitched in his throat. Frozen. Not pending. Not processing. Frozen. That meant someone had intervened. That meant his father had made a call. Before he could process the horror of that, a second notification slid onto the screen. It was a text message from a restricted number. There were no words, just an image. It was a photo of Terrence's front door in Baltimore taken from a car parked across the street. The timestamp was 2 minutes ago. Then a second text appeared. You have 24 hours, Terrence. Midnight tomorrow, or we go inside. Terrence dropped the phone as if it were burning hot. He backed away until he hit the wall, sliding down it until he was sitting on the floor, hugging his knees. He looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the punishment, but the punishment coming for him was not a timeout. It was a death sentence. It is over. He whispered, his voice trembling so hard the words were barely intelligible. It is all over, Courtney. The money is gone. Vinny is at the house. Dad is alive and he froze the account. We are dead. We are literally dead. He started to hyperventilate, gasping for air, his eyes rolling back in his head. The terror was absolute. He wasn't thinking about his father or the murder attempt. He was thinking about his kneecaps. He was thinking about the stories he had heard about Vinny's collection methods. Courtney stood in the middle of the room, staring at the television where the news anchor was moving on to the weather report. Her mind was working furiously. She was a survivor. She was a parasite who had attached herself to a host she thought was weak, but now that host had revealed himself to be a titan. She looked at her husband curled in a fetal position on the floor, a puddle of red wine soaking into his expensive white linen pants. She felt a surge of disgust so potent it almost made her gag. He was pathetic. He was useless, but she needed him. For one last play, she needed him. She walked over to him and without a word she slapped him across the face. It wasn't a gentle slap. It was a full-force backhand that snapped his head to the side and left a red mark blooming on his cheek. Terrence yelped, looking up at her in shock. "Get up," she hissed. "Get up, you idiot. Stop crying." "We are dead, Courtney," he wailed. "We are not dead," she snapped, grabbing his collar and hauling him to his feet. "We are just changing the script. Did you see the news, Terrence? Did you hear what they said? $50 million. She shook him hard. "Your father is not just a retired logistics manager. He is a partner in a $50 million port deal. He is rich, Terrence. Richer than we ever imagined." Terrence blinked, trying to focus. "So, what?" he whispered. "He knows. He called me. He knows we left him. He knows we left him on a beach," she corrected. "He does not know we tried to kill him. We can spin this. We can fix this." "How?" Terrence asked, hope warring with fear in his eyes. "We go to him," Courtney said, her eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. "We go to that mansion right now. We tell him we got lost. We tell him the Jeep broke down. We tell him we have been searching the jungle for 3 days with no sleep and no food. We tell him we were out of our minds with worry." She let go of him and began to pace the room, kicking aside the shopping bags from Hermes and the empty room service trays. "If he is that rich, we do not need to kill him," she said, talking as much to herself as to him. "We need to be his best friends. We need to be the loving children who almost lost their daddy. We need to get back in his good graces. If we play this right, he will pay off Vinny just to make the problem go away. He is still your father. Fathers forgive. That is what they do." She looked at the room. It looked like a party. It looked like a celebration. "This is all wrong," she said. "We cannot look like this. We cannot look like we just ate lobster and bought Rolexes." She grabbed the bottle of champagne from the ice bucket and poured it down the bathroom sink. She grabbed the half-eaten burgers and shoved them into the trash can, burying them under wet towels. "Take off that watch," she commanded, pointing at Terrence's wrist. He hesitated, protecting the gold Rolex. "But, take it off," she screamed, lunging at him. He scrambled to undo the clasp, dropping the heavy watch into her hand. She threw it into her suitcase and kicked it under the bed. She grabbed her new Hermes bag and shoved it into the closet. Then she turned to the mirror. She looked too perfect. Her hair was done. Her makeup was flawless. She reached up and tore the pins out of her hair, messing it up until it looked wild and unkempt. She rubbed her eyes, smearing her mascara down her cheeks until she looked like she had been crying for days. She grabbed the collar of her silk robe and ripped it, tearing the fabric. "Do it!" she yelled at Terrence. "Mess yourself up. You need to look like you have been crawling through the brush. You need to look broken." Terrence stood there frozen. Courtney grabbed a glass of water and threw it in his face. "Wake up," she shrieked. "We are fighting for our lives." She grabbed his shirt and tore a button off. She rubbed some of the spilled wine on his shirt, making it look like dirt or dried blood. "Now listen to me," she said, grabbing his face in her hands, her nails digging into his skin. "We are going to drive to that mansion. We are going to burst in there and we are going to give the performance of our lives. You are going to cry. You are going to beg. You are going to tell him you love him. You are going to tell him you are terrified he was dead. Do you understand?" Terrence nodded slowly, the desperation taking hold. "I can do that," he whispered. "I can cry. I am scared enough to cry." "Good," she said. "Now let's go. We have a father to save." They ran out of the hotel room, leaving the "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. They ran through the lobby, ignoring the stares of the staff. They jumped into the Jeep, the same Jeep they had used to drive me to my death 3 days ago. Terrence peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching. He drove like a madman, weaving through traffic, ignoring stop signs. The mansion was 10 miles away up in the hills. Every second counted. Inside the car, the atmosphere was electric with panic and rehearsal. Courtney was coaching him like a director on a movie set. "When we get there, you fall to your knees," she instructed. "You do not hug him standing up, you fall to your knees. It shows submission, it shows relief. And do not mention the money, do not mention the bank transfer. If he brings it up, you look confused. You say you don't know what he is talking about. You say you were too busy looking for him to check your phone." "I got it," Terrence said, gripping the wheel, his knuckles white. "I fall to my knees, I cry, I love him." He looked at himself in the rearview mirror. He practiced his expression. He contorted his face into a mask of anguish. He forced tears into his eyes. "Oh God, Dad," he moaned, practicing his lines. "I thought I lost you. I was so scared." "That is good," Courtney said approvingly, more shaking. "Make your voice crack." She looked out the window at the dark jungle flashing by. "We are going to win this, Terrence," she said. "We are going to get that money. We just have to survive tonight." Terrence nodded, driving faster, pushing the Jeep to its limit. He was terrified of Vinny. He was terrified of me. But mostly, he was terrified of being poor. The fear was a potent fuel. They turned onto the private road leading up to Keone's estate. The gate was open, waiting for them. It was a trap, but they didn't see it. They only saw a lifeline. They only saw a way out of the hole they had dug for themselves. As the massive house came into view, lights blazing against the night sky, Terrence let out a sob. It was a real sob born of pure stress. "I can do this," he whispered. "I can do this. He is my dad. He loves me. He has to believe me." He slammed on the brakes in front of the house, the gravel crunching under the tires just as it had on the beach. But this time, he wasn't driving away. He was walking into the lion's den. "Showtime," Courtney hissed. They opened the doors and ran toward the house, screaming my name, their voices echoing in the night air like the cries of banshees. It was grotesque. It was desperate. And it was exactly what I had been waiting for. The gravel of the driveway crunched under the tires of the Jeep as it skidded to a halt in front of the massive iron gates. It was a jarring intrusion into the elegant atmosphere of the evening. The party was in full swing. Waiters in white jackets circulated with trays of hors d'oeuvres. Soft jazz floated on the ocean breeze. The guests were the elite of Hawaii titans of industry and politics, holding crystal glasses and discussing millions. And then there was my family. They burst out of the Jeep looking like refugees from a disaster movie. Terrence had ripped his shirt. Courtney had smeared dirt on her face and messed up her hair to look like she had been trekking through the jungle for days. It was a costume, a grotesque pantomime of suffering designed to elicit sympathy. They ran toward the entrance, panting and heaving. 2 security guards, hulking men in black suits, stepped forward to block their path. They looked like stone statues, immovable and unamused. "You cannot enter," one guard rumbled, his voice deep and menacing. "Private event." Terrence looked frantic. He tried to push past the guard, but he bounced off the man's chest like a rubber ball. "That is my father," Terrence screamed, pointing a shaking finger up at the terrace where I stood. "He is up there. You have to let me in. That is my dad." I stood by the marble railing looking down at them. I held a glass of sparkling water in my hand, my Patek Philippe catching the light. I looked calm. I looked powerful. I looked nothing like the victim they had left to die. The guests near me stopped their conversations and looked down, following my gaze. They saw the dirty, desperate couple screaming at the gates. A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. I took a slow sip of water, savoring the moment. This was the stage. These were the actors, and I was the director. I raised my hand, a subtle, regal gesture. "Let them through," I called out, my voice projecting clearly over the music. "They are my children." The guards stepped aside instantly, their discipline absolute. Terrence and Courtney stumbled forward, their eyes locking onto me. They sprinted up the slate steps, their footsteps echoing like gunshots in the quiet assembly. Terrence reached the top of the stairs first. He did not stop. He did not hesitate. He threw himself at me, collapsing to his knees with a force that would have bruised him if he had not been so full of adrenaline. He wrapped his arms around my legs, burying his face in the fabric of my expensive Italian trousers. He began to weep. It was a loud, wet, ugly sound. It was the sound of a man who was terrified for his life but trying to sell it as grief. "Dad," he wailed, his voice cracking. "Oh God, Dad, you are alive. We thought you were dead. We thought we lost you forever." Courtney arrived a second later, breathless and wild-eyed. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my jacket. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, cutting tracks through the dirt she had applied to her face. "Where did you go?" she shrieked, her voice shrill and accusatory even in her fake relief. "We looked everywhere, Solomon. We have been searching the jungle for 3 days. We have not slept. We have not eaten. We were so scared." I looked down at them. I felt the heat of Terrence's body against my legs. I smelled the sweat and the fear rolling off them. It took every ounce of my will not to kick him away. It took everything I had not to spit in Courtney's face. But I had a role to play. I had to be the confused old man. I had to be the easy mark one last time. I let my shoulders slump. I relaxed my facial muscles, letting my jaw go slack. I blinked rapidly as if I was trying to clear a fog from my mind. I looked at Terrence, then at the sky, then back at Terrence. "Oh, hello, son," I said, my voice wavering slightly. "Why are you on the ground? Did you fall?" Terrence looked up, his face streaked with tears and snot. "Dad, what are you talking about? We left you. We got separated. You were gone." I frowned, scratching my head in a caricature of confusion. "Separated," I mumbled. "No, I don't think so. I went for a walk." "Yes, a little walk. The sunset was so pretty, you see. And then, well, I must have taken a wrong turn. The trees all look the same, don't they? But look," I gestured around the opulent terrace. "I met a very nice man, Mr. Keone. He gave me some water. And look at this suit, Terry. Isn't it sharp?" I patted Terrence on the head the way one pats a slow child. "Why are you crying, son? Did you lose your watch? I know how much you like that watch you bought." Terrence froze. His sobbing stopped abruptly. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face for any sign of deception. He was terrified that I knew. He was waiting for the hammer to drop. But I gave him nothing but a benign, vacuous smile. You went for a walk?" Terrence stammered. "Dad, we drove you to the beach. Do you remember the beach? The cliffs." "Beach," I repeated, testing the word. "No. I don't recall a beach. I remember the hotel. And then... Well, my memory isn't what it used to be, is it? I must have wandered off. Silly me." I saw the exact moment the terror drained out of Courtney's eyes. It was like watching a shark smell blood in the water. The fear vanished, replaced instantly by a cold, calculating predator's gaze. She looked at Terrence, who was still kneeling on the floor looking dumbfounded. She kicked his ankle discreetly, a sharp jab with the toe of her sneaker. "He doesn't remember," she whispered. Her voice was low, a hiss meant only for her husband, but I heard every syllable. The heat, the dehydration, it scrambled his brain. "He is senile, Terrence. He thinks he walked here. He doesn't remember the argument. He doesn't remember the tide." She turned back to me, beaming a smile that was terrifying in its falseness. It was the smile of a wolf looking at a lamb that had wandered into its den. "Oh, Dad," she cooed, stroking my arm with a touch that made my skin crawl. "We are just so relieved. We were so worried about your heart. But you are safe now. That is all that matters. You are safe with us." She leaned down to Terrence, pretending to comfort him but actually pulling him to his feet. "Get up, you idiot," she hissed in his ear. "This is perfect. This is better than dead." He is confused. He is pliable. And look at this place. Look at him. He is somehow connected to all this money. We do not need to explain anything. We just need to get him to sign. Terrence stood up, wiping his face with the back of his hand. He looked at me, then at the wealthy guests surrounding us who were watching the scene with polite interest, then back at Courtney. He nodded slowly. The panic was fading, replaced by the old greed. He saw a second chance. He saw the money. Right. Courtney said, her voice taking on a brisk, business-like tone. "Dad, we need to get you back to the hotel. You need rest. This excitement is not good for you." She looked around the terrace, her eyes evaluating the wealth on display. "But first, since we are all here and you are safe and happy, maybe we should handle that little paperwork matter, the one we talked about before the trip, just so we can take care of you better." She reached into her dirty, torn shirt and pulled out a folded, crumpled piece of paper. It was the power of attorney document. She had been carrying it with her even while she searched for my body. "Plan B," she mouthed to Terrence over my shoulder, her eyes glittering with malice. "Sign the power of attorney. Right here, before he wakes up, before he remembers. We take the money and we run." The warm Hawaiian breeze fluttered the tablecloths on the terrace, but the air around us felt stagnant and heavy with greed. I stood in the center of the patio, surrounded by the elite of the island, my son and daughter-in-law pressing in on me like vultures that had spotted a dying animal. Terrence was still wiping his nose with the back of his hand, his face a mask of fake relief and genuine terror. He looked at the wealthy guests holding their crystal flutes, and then he looked back at me, his eyes darting around as if he expected Vinny the loan shark to jump out from behind a palm tree. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was doing the math. He was calculating how many seconds he had left before his life imploded. He needed a miracle, and I was about to give him one. A miracle wrapped in a trap. I leaned back against the marble railing, letting my posture slump just enough to sell the image of the confused, weary old man. I looked at Keone, who was standing a few feet away watching us with the impassive expression of a bodyguard. "He is a very generous man," I said, my voice wavering slightly as if my mind were drifting. "Mr. Keone, he likes my stories about the port. He says my ideas about the crane logistics are worth a lot of money." Courtney's ears perked up. She stepped closer, her hand tightening on my arm. Her grip was painful, a reminder of who was really in charge in her mind. "Money," she repeated, her voice sharp. "What do you mean money, Dad? Did he pay you for something?" I nodded slowly, a vacant smile playing on my lips. "Oh yes, he said he wanted to buy my consulting services. Right now. Up front. He likes to do business in cash," he said. I paused, letting the words hang there. I saw Terrence stop breathing. I saw the pupils of his eyes dilate, swallowing the iris. The panic that had been consuming him for the last 48 hours vanished instantly, replaced by a hunger so raw it was almost frightening to behold. "How much?" Terrence whispered. "How much did he pay you, Dad?" I looked at the sky, pretending to think, pretending to struggle with the number. "5," I said softly. "I think he said 5. 5,000. Courtney scoffed, her disappointment evident. "That is nice, Solomon, but it barely covers the flight home." "No," I corrected her gently. "Not 5,000. 5 million. $5 million. He said the contract is on the table inside." The silence that fell between the three of us was absolute. It was a vacuum, a void, where morality and love used to exist. $5 million. It was a number that changed gravity. It was a number that could make a son forget he had just tried to murder his father. It was a number that could make a daughter-in-law forget she had left an old man to be washed away by the tide. 5 million, Terrence choked out. His knees buckled, and he had to grab Courtney's shoulder to stay upright. "Cash." "Yes," I said, blinking innocently. But I told him, "I am too old for that kind of money. What would I do with it? Buy a boat? I cannot even swim." I told him I should probably just leave it to you kids. You know how to spend money better than I do. It was the bait, the ultimate bait. And they swallowed it whole, hook, line, and sinker. Courtney let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. She looked at Terrence, and her eyes were shining with a manic light. All the dirt on her face, all the ripped clothes, all the fake tears, it all fell away. In that moment, she was pure avarice. "You are right, Dad," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. You are absolutely right. You do not need that stress. You have a bad heart. Managing that kind of money is a burden. It is dangerous. People will try to take advantage of you. She looked around the terrace, her eyes scanning the crowd to make sure no one was too close to hear the details. Then she reached into her shirt. She pulled out a piece of paper. It was folded and refolded so many times the creases were white. It was stained with sweat and maybe a little bit of the dirt she had smeared on her face. It was the power of attorney document. She had carried it with her into the jungle. She had carried it while she searched for my body, not to save me but to find my wallet. She had kept it close to her heart like a love letter. "We can help you," she said, unfolding the paper with shaking hands. "We can take that burden off your shoulders right now. We talked about this, remember? Before the trip, we just want to protect you." She smoothed the paper out on the top of a high cocktail table. It looked ridiculous there amongst the orchids and the champagne glasses. A crumpled, dirty legal document in the middle of paradise. "Sign this," Dad Terrence urged, stepping up to the other side of me. He was practically vibrating. His eyes were fixed on the paper as if it were a holy scripture. "Just sign it and we will handle Mr. Keone. We will handle the bank. We will handle everything. You can just rest. You can retire for real." He pulled a pen from his pocket. It was a cheap plastic hotel pen he must have grabbed from the nightstand in his panic. He clicked it open and thrust it toward me. "Do it now, Dad," he said, his voice tight. "Before we leave. Before you forget." I looked at the pen. I looked at the paper. I looked at my son. He was selling me. He was selling his father for $5 million. He wasn't even asking if I was okay. He wasn't asking how I survived 3 days in the wild without food or water. He wasn't asking about the heart attack I surely must have had. He was only asking for my signature. He was proving every doubt I had ever had about him wrong. He was worse than I feared. He was hollow. I reached out and took the pen. My hand trembled. To them it looked like the frailty of age, the weakness of a man who had been through hell. To me, it was the vibration of a rage so intense it threatened to crack my ribs from the inside. Courtney guided my hand to the signature line. Her fingers were cold and clammy. "Right here, Dad," she whispered. "Just right here. Solomon Hayes. That is all you need to do. And then we are safe. We are all safe." She meant she was safe. She meant she could pay off Vinny and buy her Hermes bags and live in my house until I finally had the decency to die. I lowered the pen to the paper. The tip hovered millimeters above the line. The guests around us had gone quiet. They were watching. They didn't know what was happening exactly, but they sensed the tension. They saw the dirty, desperate couple forcing an impeccably dressed older man to sign something. They saw the hunger in Terrence's eyes. Keone moved a step closer, ready to intervene if things got physical. But I didn't need him. Not yet. I pressed the pen to the paper. A tiny dot of ink appeared. Terrence let out a breath he had been holding for 3 days. "Yes," he hissed. "Yes." I stopped. I lifted the pen. I frowned, squinting at the paper as if the words were swimming before my eyes. I blinked rapidly. I moved the paper closer to my face, then further away. "What is wrong?" Courtney snapped, her patience evaporating in a millisecond. "Just sign it." "Solomon." "I cannot read it," I mumbled. "The letters, they are too small. It is all blurry." "It is the power of attorney," Terrence said, his voice rising in panic. "You know what it is, Dad. We told you. It gives us the right to handle the money for you. Just sign your name. You know how to sign your name, don't you?" I looked at him. I saw the sweat dripping down his forehead. I saw the vein pulsing in his neck. He was so close. He could almost taste the money. I shook my head slowly. "I never sign anything I cannot read, son," I said, my voice reverting to the firm tone of the logistics manager I used to be. "You know that. Rule number 1 of the port. Verify the manifest." Courtney looked like she was about to scream. She looked around frantically. "Read it to him, Terrence," she ordered. "Read it to him so he knows what it says." "I do not need him to read it," I said, interrupting her. "I need to see it. I need my eyes." I patted the pockets of my jacket. I patted the pockets of my trousers. I looked confused. I looked helpless. "Where are they?" I muttered. "I always have them." "What?" Terrence yelled. "What do you need?" "My glasses," I said, looking up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "I cannot sign without my reading glasses, son. Do you have them?" Terrence froze. "Your glasses," he repeated. "Yes," I said. "They were in my bag. My brown leather bag, the one you were holding for me in the car. Remember?" The color drained from his face. He remembered. He remembered Courtney snatching the bag. He remembered tossing it into the front seat. He remembered driving away with it. It is in the car, he stammered. In the hotel. No, it is not. Courtney interjected quickly, her eyes darting back and forth. We lost it. When we were searching for you. We dropped it in the jungle. It is gone, Solomon. Just sign the paper without the glasses. It is fine. Trust us. Trust you, I repeated slowly, testing the words. Trust you. Yes, Terrence pleaded. We are your family. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had left me to die. I looked at the woman who had planned it, and then I smiled. It wasn't the smile of a senile old man. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. But I do not need to trust you, I said, my voice dropping the waver, dropping the confusion, becoming hard and clear as a diamond. Because I found something interesting in my pocket. I reached into the inside pocket of my $5,000 suit jacket. Terrence watched me, his eyes locked on my hand. He expected glasses. He expected a wallet. Instead, I pulled out a small orange plastic bottle. The label was faded and peeled, but the name was still visible. Nitroglycerin. I held it up to the light. It was empty. My glasses might be lost, I said, my voice booming across the silent terrace, but I found this. This is my heart medication. The medication that keeps me alive. The medication that was in the bag you say you lost in the jungle. I took a step toward them. So tell me, son, if you lost the bag in the jungle, why did I find this bottle in the trash can of your hotel room this afternoon? The question hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Terrence's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Courtney took a step back, her heels clicking on the stone. The trap had snapped shut, and there was no way out. The terrace of the mansion was silent, save for the rhythmic crashing of the waves far below against the cliffs. It was a natural sound of violence that underscored the man-made violence happening right here on the slate patio. I held the small orange bottle up between my thumb and forefinger like a prosecutor holding a murder weapon. The plastic caught the ambient light, glowing like an ember. It was such a small thing, a piece of plastic worth a few cents. Yet in that moment it weighed more than the $5 million I had just dangled in front of them. Terrence stared at the bottle. His eyes were fixed on the faded white label where my name was printed. I could see the gears in his mind grinding to a halt. He was trying to find a lie. He was trying to find a way to explain how a bottle from a bag lost in the deep jungle had miraculously teleported into the wastebasket of his suite at the Princeville resort. There was no explanation. There was no spin. There was only the cold, hard fact that he was caught. You said you lost the bag, Terrence. I said, my voice low and dangerous. You said you dropped it while you were frantically searching for your poor lost father. You said you were running through the underbrush screaming my name. I took a step closer to him. He flinched as if I were about to strike him. But this bottle tells a different story, son. This bottle says you never searched. This bottle says you drove straight back to the hotel. It says you took my bag into your room. It says you rifled through my things. You took the cash. You took the cards. And then you took the medicine that keeps my heart beating and you threw it in the trash like it was a candy wrapper. Courtney let out a strangled noise. She tried to step in front of Terrence, trying to physically block him from my accusation, but her movements were jerky and uncoordinated. That is not yours, she stammered, her eyes darting around the crowd of onlookers. That is Terrence's. He has anxiety. He takes pills for it. That is his bottle. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Anxiety, I repeated. Does he take nitroglycerin for anxiety, Courtney? Because that is what this is. And unless Terrence has developed a 70-year-old man's heart condition in the last 3 days, this bottle belongs to me. I turned to the crowd of well-dressed guests. They were no longer chatting. They were no longer drinking. They were transfixed. They were witnessing a Greek tragedy unfold in real time. My associates are very thorough, I announced, raising my voice so the back row could hear. While my son and his wife were busy buying handbags and watches this afternoon, my friends visited their hotel room. They found the receipt for the Hermes bag paid for with my card. They found the Rolex hidden under the bed. And they found this bottle in the trash can next to the remains of a lobster dinner. I looked back at Terrence. You ate lobster while I drank rainwater off a leaf. You drank champagne while I prayed my heart wouldn't stop. Terrence's knees finally gave out. He didn't fall dramatically this time. He just sank. He slid down until he was sitting on his heels looking up at me with the eyes of a child who knows the monster under the bed is real. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "I didn't mean for you to die. We just needed the money, Dad." "Vinny, he said he would kill me." "You didn't mean for me to die?" I asked. I looked at Keone. He was standing by a large flat-screen monitor that had been set up to display the architectural renderings of the new port project. He gave me a subtle nod. He tapped his tablet. "If you didn't mean for me to die, Terrence, then we should probably watch this." The image on the giant screen flickered. The blueprints of cranes and shipping containers vanished. In their place, a grainy, wide-angle video feed appeared. It was the interior of a car. The dashboard was visible, and through the windshield you could see the red dirt road of the Kauai coast. It was the dash cam footage from the Jeep. Terrence gasped. He recognized the dashboard. He recognized the view. "I had installed that camera 2 years ago," I said, my eyes never leaving his face. "Back when I thought Courtney was cheating on you. I set it to upload to a private cloud server whenever the car was in range of a signal. I forgot it was there. Until today." On the screen, the Jeep was moving. The timestamp in the corner showed the date. 3 days ago. The audio kicked in loud and clear over the terrace speakers. "Stop the car!" Terrence Courtney's voice rang out from the speakers, sharp and cruel. "Right here. This is the spot." The car on the screen slowed. The view through the windshield showed the cliff edge. The same cliff edge where they had abandoned me. "But Dad is back there," Terrence's voice said on the recording. "He sounds sick. Maybe we should just give him the water." "No," Courtney's voice snapped back. "No water? No pills? If we leave him with supplies, he might survive long enough to walk out. We need him gone, Terrence. We need him washed away." There was a pause in the recording, a silence that hung heavy in the humid night air. "The tide comes in at 10, Courtney said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the high-quality microphone picked up perfectly. "If we leave him now, he will be too weak to climb. The ocean will do the rest. Just die already, old man. Just die so we are debt-free." The video showed the car stopping. It showed the doors opening. Then it showed the car driving away. The camera was facing forward, so it didn't show me being left behind. But it recorded the conversation as they drove back to the hotel. He looked so pathetic, Courtney's recorded voice laughed. "Did you see him crawling? Like a bug. I feel sick," Terrence said on the tape. "You will feel better when the transfer clears," Courtney replied. 200,000 for Vinny, 200,000 for us. It is a fair trade, a dead dad for a fresh start." The screen went black. The silence on the terrace was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Every single person in that crowd had heard it. They had heard the premeditation. They had heard the malice. They had heard the murder. Courtney stood frozen. Her face was a mask of pure horror. The dirt she had smeared on her cheeks to look like a victim now looked like war paint that had failed. She looked at the guests. She looked at Keone. She looked at me. She saw no pity. She saw no way out. That is fake," she shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. "That is AI. You made that up. You are trying to frame us." I shook my head slowly. "It is time-stamped, Courtney. It is geolocated, and it is already in the hands of the district attorney." Terrence looked at the black screen. The reality of what he had done washed over him. He wasn't just a bad son. He wasn't just a thief. He was a man who had been recorded plotting the death of his own father for a split of the inheritance. He looked up at me. His face was gray. All the blood had drained away, leaving him looking like a wax figure. "Dad," he whispered. "Do not call me that," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "My son died on that beach. You are just the man who killed him." Courtney realized then that there was no signing the paper. There was no $5 million. There was no way to talk her way out of this. The walls had closed in, and the roof was falling. She reacted with the instinct of a trapped animal. She lunged. She didn't lunge at me. She lunged at the table where the fake contract and the pen still lay. She grabbed the heavy crystal glass I had been drinking from. She wasn't thinking. She was just lashing out, trying to break something, trying to hurt someone, trying to create chaos to cover her escape. She threw the glass at me. It was a pathetic throw, wild and desperate. It smashed against the marble railing, shattering into 1,000 diamond shards. "Run!" she screamed at Terrence. "Run, you idiot!" She turned and sprinted toward the stairs, pushing past a waiter, sending a tray of champagne flutes crashing to the ground. She was running for the Jeep. She was running for the gate. She was running for a freedom that was already gone. Terrence scrambled to his feet. He looked at me one last time, a look of pure, unadulterated regret. Not regret for what he did, but regret that he got caught. Then he turned and followed her, his footsteps heavy and stumbling on the slate. I didn't move. Keone didn't move. We just watched them run. We watched them sprint toward the darkness, toward the illusion of escape. "Let them go," Keone said softly. "They won't get far," I replied. The sound of sirens began to rise from the bottom of the hill. Blue and red lights flashed against the tropical foliage, cutting through the darkness. The guests on the terrace, who had been standing so still, suddenly reached into their jackets. They weren't reaching for phones. They were reaching for badges. The waiter, who had been knocked over, stood up and pulled a radio from his belt. "Suspects are fleeing toward the main gate," he said calmly. "Take them down." The trap hadn't just snapped shut. It had been welded tight. And my son and his wife were running straight into the teeth of it. The tropical night air, once filled with the scent of jasmine and ocean salt, was now thick with the smell of panic. Terrence and Courtney sprinted toward the main gate, their footsteps slapping against the pavement like the desperate heartbeats of trapped animals. They thought they were running toward freedom, toward the dark jungle that could hide their sins. They did not know they were running into a wall of blue steel. From my vantage point on the terrace, I watched the final act of their tragedy unfold. They reached the end of the driveway, lungs, burning eyes fixed on the gap between the iron gates. But just as they crossed the threshold, the darkness exploded with light. Floodlights mounted on concealed pillars snapped on, blinding them with a brilliance usually reserved for prison yards. Red and blue strobes flashed from the bushes, from behind the parked cars, from the very trees themselves. The sound of sirens erupted, a cacophony that drowned out the crashing waves below. "Freeze, police. Get on the ground. Now." The command boomed from a loudspeaker, authoritative and final. Terrence skidded to a halt, throwing his hands up to shield his eyes. Courtney screamed a high, thin sound of pure terror and tried to veer off into the landscaping, but she didn't make it 2 steps. The guests on the lawn, the men and women in tuxedos and evening gowns who had been sipping champagne and politely ignoring the commotion, suddenly shed their disguises. They pulled badges from their jackets. They drew weapons from concealed holsters. The waiter, who had been serving hors d'oeuvres, tackled Courtney with a precision that spoke of SWAT training, not culinary school. She hit the grass hard, the wind knocked out of her expensive stolen jewelry scattering in the dirt. It was a sting operation of massive proportions. Keone had not just called a few favors. He had mobilized the entire island's justice system. I walked down the slate stairs, my movements slow and deliberate. Keone walked beside me, a silent guardian. We approached the chaotic scene at the gate. Terrence was on his knees, his hands laced behind his head, sobbing uncontrollably. 2 officers were cuffing him, their movements rough and efficient. Courtney was writhing on the ground, spitting curses at the officer holding her down. Kenji Tanaka, my lawyer, stepped out from the shadows. He was holding a thick folder of documents. He looked at me, gave a curt nod, and then walked over to where Terrence was kneeling. "Terrence Hayes Kenji," announced his voice carrying over the sirens. "You are under arrest for the attempted murder of Solomon Hayes, conspiracy to commit fraud, grand larceny, and elder abuse." He turned to Courtney. "Courtney Hayes, you are under arrest for the same charges plus identity theft and forgery." The words hung in the air, heavy and irrevocable. Attempted murder. It wasn't a family dispute anymore. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a felony that carried a life sentence. Courtney stopped struggling. She lifted her head, her face smeared with dirt and grass stains. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape, looking for a scapegoat. They landed on Terrence. It was him, she shrieked, her voice raw. It was his idea. He wanted the money. He owes the loan sharks. I told him not to do it. I begged him to stop. Terrence looked up, his face a mask of betrayal. "You," he choked out. "You planned the tide. You wrote the note on the lottery ticket. You told me he was just biomass." "She planned it," Courtney screamed over him. "She forced me. She said if I didn't help her, Vinny would kill us both. She is the monster." They tore at each other with words, ripping apart their marriage, their partnership, their shared humanity. It was ugly. It was pathetic. It was the sound of rats eating each other in a sinking ship. "Enough," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through their screaming match like a knife. They both fell silent, looking up at me. I stood over them, the lights casting my shadow long across the grass. I looked at the man who shared my DNA, the man I had bounced on my knee, the man I had taught to shave. Dad, Terrence whispered, tears streaming down his face. Dad, please. I am sorry. I was scared. Vinny, he was going to hurt me. Please, Dad. Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them to let me go. I will pay you back. I will work. I will do anything. He tried to crawl toward me, dragging the officers with him. I am your son, Dad. You cannot send your son to prison. You love me. You always forgive me. I looked at him. I searched my heart for that familiar well of forgiveness, that fatherly instinct that had saved him 1,000 times before. I looked for the pity. I looked for the love. I found nothing. The well was dry. It had dried up on that beach while I sucked water from a leaf. It had turned to dust when I watched him buy a Rolex with my money. I stepped closer, leaning down so my face was inches from his. You are right, Terrence, I said softly. Fathers forgive their sons. Fathers protect their sons. Hope flared in his eyes, a desperate, pathetic hope. But you made a mistake, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like the ocean dragging stones. You killed your father. Terrence blinked, confused. What? No. Dad, you are alive. You are right here. No, I said, straightening up and adjusting my cuffs. Solomon the father died on that beach 3 days ago. He died of thirst and heartbreak. The man standing in front of you is Solomon, the witness, and I have no son. The color drained from Terrence's face. The realization hit him. He wasn't talking to his dad anymore. He was talking to a stranger with $5 million and a grudge. I have no son. I repeated, my voice hard as granite. My son died the moment he drove away and left an old man to drown. You are just a stranger who tried to kill me for a payout. Terrence let out a wail of despair that echoed into the night. It was the sound of a man realizing he was truly, utterly alone. Courtney, realizing that the emotional appeal had failed, tried a different tactic. She stopped crying. Her face hardened into a sneer. Fine, she spat. Send us to jail. But you still lose, old man. Vinny is still coming. He will burn your house down. He will find you. You can't hide forever. I looked at her. I almost admired her tenacity. Almost. You are right, Courtney, I said. Vinny is a problem. Or he was. I nodded to Kenji. Kenji opened the folder and pulled out a document. He held it up so they could see it in the floodlights. It was a bill of sale. While you were shopping for handbags this afternoon, I was busy too, I said. I sold the house in Baltimore. Terrence's eyes widened. You sold the house cash deal, I said. Quick close. To a developer who plans to bulldoze it tomorrow morning. But that is our home, Terrence stammered. That is where we live. That was my house, I corrected. You were just guests who overstayed their welcome. And as for the proceeds... Kenji pulled out another document, a wire transfer confirmation. $300,000, I said. The exact value of the house after the rush sale. You paid, Vinnie Courtney asked, a flicker of hope returning. You paid off the debt. I laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. Pay a criminal, no. I donated every single cent to the Baltimore Police Foundation, specifically to their organized crime division, with a note attaching Vinny's name and address as a person of interest regarding illegal lending. Courtney's mouth dropped open. You see, I continued, Vinny isn't looking for me anymore. He is too busy running from the RICO task force that just kicked down his door an hour ago. And since the house is gone and the money is gone and you two are going to prison, I leaned in close again. You have nothing. No home, no money for lawyers, no leverage. You are destitute. I signaled to the officers. Get them out of my sight. The officers hauled them up. Terrence was dead weight, his legs dragging on the ground. Courtney was screaming obscenities, cursing me to hell. I watched them being dragged toward the waiting squad cars. I watched the doors slam shut, cutting off their screams. I watched the lights flash as they drove away, taking the last remnants of my old life with them. I stood there in the driveway of the mansion, surrounded by strangers who were now my only allies. My chest ached, a phantom pain from a heart that had been broken and reforged. Keone walked up and put a hand on my shoulder. It is done, he said. I looked at the empty driveway. Yes, I said, it is done. I turned my back on the road and walked back toward the house. I had a new life to build, and I had a lot of work to do. The red and blue lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, disappearing down the winding road like fading embers of a dying fire. The silence that rushed back into the driveway of Keone's estate was heavy, but it was clean. It was the silence of a storm that had finally broken. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space where my son had knelt and begged. I thought I would feel a pang of regret. I thought I would feel that familiar tug of parental guilt that had defined my life for 32 years. I waited for it. I searched for it in the corners of my heart. But it did not come. Instead, I felt a lightness I had not experienced in decades. The weight of Terrence's failures, the crushing burden of his debts, the constant anxiety of wondering what mess I would have to clean up next, it was all gone. It was in the back of a squad car headed for a holding cell. I thought about what awaited them. Prison would be hard for Courtney. She was a creature of comfort, a woman who defined herself by brands and status. A concrete cell and a jumpsuit would break her spirit within a week. But for Terrence, prison might actually be the safest place for him, and that was the darkest irony of all. I knew Vinny. I didn't know him personally, but I knew his type. Men like that do not care about borders, and they do not care about excuses. When the news hit the wire that the house in Baltimore was sold and the proceeds donated to the police, Vinny would know he had been played. He would know his money was never coming. Terrence would spend every day of his sentence looking over his shoulder, wondering if the new inmate in the cell block was sent to collect a debt that could only be paid in blood. He had traded a quick death for his father for a slow lifetime of terror for himself. It was a fitting punishment. It was the logistics of karma. Action and reaction. Cause and effect. Kenji packed up his briefcase, the snap of the latches sounding loud in the quiet night. He walked over to me, his face solemn. "I will handle the arraignment," he said. "You do not need to be there unless you want to be. I suggest you stay here. Let the lawyers handle the noise." I nodded. I had no desire to see them again. I had said my piece. I had looked my killer in the eye and told him he was a stranger. There was nothing left to say. "Go home, Kenji," I said. "Send the bill to my new address." He smiled a small, tight smile. "There is no Bill Solomon. Keone took care of it. Consider it a welcome gift to the neighborhood." He got into his car and drove away, leaving me and Keone standing alone under the vast Hawaiian sky. The adrenaline that had sustained me for 3 days began to crash. My legs felt heavy. My chest ached not with angina, but with the phantom pain of a severed limb. I had cut off my own arm to save my life. It was necessary, but it still left a scar. "Let's go inside," Keone said, his voice gentle. "The show is over. Now you have to live." 1 month later, the sun was setting over that same stretch of coastline, but the view looked different now. It was no longer a place of death. It was just a beach. The waves crashed with the same violence, but now I heard a rhythm in them, a heartbeat rather than a threat. I sat on a folding chair, my feet buried in the warm sand, holding a cold bottle of local beer. The condensation dripped onto my hand, cooling the skin. Keone sat next to me, silent and companionable. We watched the line where the ocean met the sky, wondering how many other secrets were buried in those depths. My physical wounds had healed. The bruises were gone. The ribs had knit back together. My heart, thanks to the proper medication and a lack of stress, was beating stronger than it had in years. But the real healing had happened in the quiet moments between the chaos. It happened in the mornings when I woke up without worrying about a phone call asking for money. It happened in the evenings when I realized my bank account was mine and my future belonged to me. So Keone said, breaking the silence. "The police released the impounded Jeep. They found your bag in the trunk. Your ID, your old phone. It is all there. You can go back to Baltimore if you want. You can buy a new house. Start over." I took a sip of beer, tasting the hops and the sea air. I thought about Baltimore. I thought about the gray streets, the cold winters, the empty house filled with memories of a wife who had passed and a son who had failed. There was nothing there for me. Just ghosts. "I am not going back," I said. "I sold the house, remember. I burned the bridges." Keone nodded, looking satisfied. "Good. Because I have a problem." I looked at him, raising an eyebrow. "What kind of problem?" "Logistics problem," Keone said, pointing a thick finger toward the distant harbor. "The new port project, the one we faked for the news. The governor actually called me yesterday. He saw the broadcast. He said the current infrastructure is a disaster. He wants to know if the expert from the mainland is actually available for a consultation. He says they have the budget if we have the brain power." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, deep and rumbling. "You want me to work. I am retired Keone. I am supposed to be dead." "You are not dead," Keone said, grinning. You are just starting the second act, and besides, I need someone to yell at the contractors when they are late. I am too nice. You have that look, the look that makes people work harder. I looked at the ocean. I looked at the man who had pulled me off the rocks and given me a second chance. I realized that for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't defined by my responsibilities to others. I wasn't a father. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't an employee. I was just Solomon. And Solomon was a man who hated inefficiency. I will take a look at the plans, I said, but I work on my own schedule, and I want a view of the water from my office. Done, Keone said, clinking his bottle against mine. Welcome home, partner. The sun finally dipped below the horizon, turning the world into a canvas of indigo and black. It was time. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the old cell phone the police had returned to me. It was scuffed and battered. The screen was cracked. It was the device Terrence had used to call me to beg for money. It was the device I had used to track his lies. It was a digital archive of a toxic history. I turned it on one last time. The screen lit up, glowing in the darkness. There were dozens of voicemails, some from Terrence before the arrest, some from Courtney, some from friends in Baltimore who had seen the news and wanted the gossip. I didn't listen to any of them. I didn't scroll through the photos. I didn't check the texts. I stood up and walked to the water's edge. The tide was coming in just like it had that night. The foam swirled around my ankles, warm and inviting. I weighed the phone in my hand. It felt heavy, like a stone around my neck. This phone contained the proof of my son's existence in my life. It held the birthday messages, the requests for loans, the fake apologies. It held the history of a man named Solomon Hayes, who had been a victim. I pulled my arm back. I channeled the anger, the grief, the betrayal, and the hope into one motion. I threw the phone. It soared through the air, a small rectangle of light spinning against the stars. It arched high over the breakers, flying further than I thought an old man could throw. It hit the water with a negligible splash, swallowed instantly by the vast indifference of the Pacific Ocean. I watched the spot where it landed for a long moment. I waited to feel sad. I waited to feel a sense of loss. But all I felt was the salt spray on my face and the steady beat of my heart. The waves washed over the sand, erasing my footprints, erasing the past, preparing the ground for whatever came next. I turned my back on the ocean. I walked back up the beach toward the lights of the house where Keone was waiting. I had a meeting in the morning. I had a port to redesign. I had a life to live. The screen fades to black. If you enjoyed this story of justice and survival, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments if you would have forgiven your son, or if you would have done exactly what I did. Until next time, remember, family is not about blood. It is about who has your back when the tide comes in. Stay safe. Through this ordeal, I learned that the most dangerous blindfold is the one woven from our own love. I spent years enabling a monster because I desperately wanted to see the child I raised. But love without boundaries is just self-destruction. I discovered that family is not determined by blood, but by loyalty and shared values. Keone, a stranger, became more of a brother to me in 3 days than my son had been in 30 years. It is never too late to burn the bridge that leads back to a toxic past and build a new one toward peace. If you enjoyed this story of justice and survival, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of truth and redemption.